Hello everyone, Zeno What If here. Those that are new to the channel, subscribe to see some of the content I made. Leave a comment down below for any ideas. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Link down in the description of the fanfiction of this, What If. To bring in part 18 of What If the Gate appeared in G.I. Joe. Chapter 34, God's Summoning. Welcome back, General, said Hazama, as he was greeting Centurion, who just returned from Kriti village. I see that your mission was a successful. Indeed it was, answered Centurion. We've just stopped a terrible plague that was threatening the entire continent. Although I must admit that Rory is in some concerns. Seems that whoever was tampering with the attempt of reviving someone has probably done a great damage to the underworld. It's like making a crack in the reservoir, which contains dangerous acid, and it beginning to leak. So you suggest that whoever tried to revive that woman might be able to make a crack in the underworld ceiling? Asked Hazama. Unknown, answered Centurion. It's too soon to tell right now, until we confirm our suspicions. I need to study more of those notes I've taken from Arun. Well, for now, that'll have to wait, sir, said Hazama. We've just received an unusual letter from the city of Belnargo. Belnargo? Surprised Centurion. That's where Hardy's main temple is located. That's right, said Hazama, and they've sent a message to you, sir. He handed to Centurion a black box with a scroll in it. Centurion took the scroll and read it, then after a few minutes, he lowered with an excited face. Wait till Rory and Yao hears about this, he said and stormed off Hazama's office. While Centurion was busy looking for Rory and Yao, Lieutenant Taylor was already having set off on his own mission from Italica. The Lady Agrippina was going home and was prepared to exact bloody retribution upon her former lover and soon-to-be ex-husband. She had waited, sharpening her blade as she listened for news of her husband and lands and trained with Corporal Nakamura, and now she deemed it time to return home and literally put her house back in order. Proceeding southeast from Italica, Taylor's party would first stop in Alnus for resupply before returning Lady Agrippina to her estate. After this, Taylor's party would travel north, along the coast of the Blue Sea, up past the port of Antica and the heart of the Octavius lands. Following the guidance of her mentor, Lady Octavia, and after careful consideration, Agrippina had privately negotiated the security of her lands as an extension of the Italica Principality. In meetings with Countess Mayui and her advisors, Agrippina had well come to see the threat posed by marauding bands of deserters who had taken to banditry after the disastrous battles at Alnus. Having powerful allies who could protect her lands would be very important, and Agrippina had quite well realized that the empire was in little position to protect her or any other citizens of the empire, even if they were inclined to do so. And at Italica, she had witnessed that aside from Princess Pina's knights, any imperial troops still garrisoning out here would probably be of disappointing quality at any rate. So, any pragmatic view of the situation required other arrangements. To that end, the party would take on a contingent of US Seabees and a squad of Marines, and these men would be carrying radios. This single device, Agrippina recognized as extremely powerful, especially when combined with the incredible speed of offworlder machines. In exchange for a powerful ally who could appear almost at will in an emergency, Agrippina was willing to risk the opinions of her neighbors and fellow nobles who had not seen these things. Taylor almost regretted that he would not have the proud noblewoman to accompany the rest of his journey. Certainly, her insights into the local lay of the land would have been useful, but, on the other hand, Aurelia and the knights Panache had assigned to accompany him would be fully qualified to guide him in the intricacies of local feudal politics. Further, only one man held Agrippina's attention, and Taylor certainly did not envy him. Of course, that again was only the first stop on their planned journey, so it was as well that Zivana and Kalua had already undertaken a number of patrols with Marines from Lieutenant Mayer's platoon. It was a good mix, as the knights and Marines respected each other as professionals. This did not mean that some of the 3rd Squad's Marines were above attempting to show off in front of the two knights, nor that all of their efforts went unnoticed. But it seemed to Taylor that the Lady Kalua had already singled out the squad's field radio operator, a 19-year-old lance corporal named Walter Peterson, for her own interest, having asked him if he liked mixed drinks. Taylor refrained at showing amusement at the corporal's embarrassment and Kaluuya's forward conduct, but he would try to make sure the young man did not get in over his head. No matter what, the trip would be an interesting one, he thought as he mounted his horse. Patting Lexington fondly, he raised a hand and thrust it forward. Head him up and move him out. Or you're saying that there's gonna be a God summit in Belnargo? Asked surprised Arpeggio. That's right, proudly said Rory. According to the scroll Centurion received, Flare, Emroy and other gods are coming to Belnargo to participate in a special meeting, which will include the discussion of Hardy's latest stunts. I can't wait to tell Emroy and the others about her deeds with the dragons, that earthquake and Kriti epidemic. He'll fry that stupid bitch alive. And not only that, all other apostles will also come there. This is definitely something big. I must go there right now. If we go to Belnargo, said Lele, then perhaps we can stop at Rondel for a few days. What for? Asked Tuca. I'd like to participate in the upcoming contest of the mages for Archmage, answered Lele. There's a few theories I would like to show there as well. Sounds real good, said Kato. That way, they'll also recognize you as one of their best students. I would like to go as well, said Mimosa. There are a few of my researches I have in my archive in Rondel that explains about the origins of the gate. Plus, Sir Prime asked me to help him meet the Council of Rondel. He said, it's really important. If you wanna go, Sage, said Arpeggio, I'll go as well. Are you really sure, Arpeggio? Asked Kato. I think your sister is more than enough of capable handling herself. No way, yelled Arpeggio. Do you really think I would allow my own sister to go to Rondel and to Belnargo with my grandmother? No way. If they'll go, so will I. Let's just hope you won't get into trouble, as usual, said Lele. Hey, yelled Arpeggio, I'm helping you, not trying to upstage you. Calm down, girls, said Mimosa, there's no need for you to start fighting with each other. Speaking of fighting, said Rory, aren't you planning to say something about our trip to Belnargo, Yao? Yes, answered Yao, I'm going to officially renounce my faith towards Hardy, as well my clan's faith. I'm also gonna testify against Hardy by telling the gods everything she and her apostle did against my clan. Sounds good to me, said Tuca, so, when we shall depart? By tomorrow morning, answered Rory. Centurion is already arranging our departure by Tomahawk. Whoa, gasped Arpeggio, or we're gonna fly there by using one of those big flying machines. That's right, said Lele, this might be also a perfect timing for me to study more about those machines. Don't tell me that you're gonna drive one, groaned Rory. I've learned quite well, unlike you, replied Lele, making Rory pouted about Lele's remark. It was true that Rory turned out to be a poor driver, who cannot even ride a bicycle, while Lele has mastered not only the bicycle but also driving of HMMV in quite fast times. Why the hell I should participate in this, groaned Atami. Because you're a special forces soldier and a ranger, that's why, dumbass, snorted Eric. So, let me get this straight, sir, we're gonna go on summit by the higher deities of this world. That's right, answered Centurion, that's exactly what they want from us. Also, I've already informed the leaders of the Big Three and Prime Minister Sarugi, and they all confirmed their interests in this mission. This is practically for us the moment of truth. These gods have the reason why they allowed the gate to be opened, and what exactly the mission Zumfoot has entrusted to his apostle, Mabel Thorne. If we contact them, we'll be finally able to learn everything about Hardy's latest shenanigans, as well why did she wanted to destroy the gate by using the Deirdrico, as well why did she was creating those dragons in Mount Tube. So, said Atami, we're going to ask the big shots and learn from them the truth. Well, no wonder why the higher-ups are so anxious about this meeting. Why me and Eric? Because, Atami, answered Centurion, you're a Japanese officer, as well former Special Forces soldier, as Eric said. Prime Minister Sarugi personally trusted you, as well Minister of Defense Kano, so that you'll represent your nation on this summit. As for Eric, he'll go, because right now it's too dangerous for him to appear in Sedera. As you know, the Empire is on the verge of signing the unconditional surrender. However, there's also a danger of Prince Zorzel, who might stage a coup to take over. A coup? Asked Eric, begging your pardon, sir, but aren't we ain't gonna do something about it? Negative, Marine, answered Centurion. You should know that ANF policy does not include in meddling with the affairs of other states' businesses, unlike your own government was doing for the last 40 years. We've seen what this has led the USA, and we're not gonna repeat the same mistake here. Whatever domestic squabbles Zorzel and Mold have, their struggle for power is none of our concerns, but rescuing those who want peace with us is our business. So therefore, we do not gonna enter for with Zorzel's possible coup, because that way it'll help us to clearly see our enemies from the Hawk Party, including Zorzel himself. That way, once the pro-peace side form their own government, we can make an agreement with them, so we can crush the Hawks, including Zorzel, with everything we've got. I like it, smiled Eric, but what about me? Surely, you don't expect a US Marine to run away from a fight. You're not running, Eric, answered Centurion, you're going with us as an official representative of the United States of America. Those are the orders I've got about you straight from the President himself. The Commander-in-Chief, surprised Eric. That's right, said Centurion, President Marshall expects that you, Lieutenant Eric Hartman, will fulfill your duty with pride and honor, as any U.S. Marine. Yes, sir, answered Eric, standing straight. At ease, smiled Centurion. Now then, while we're on our way to Belnargo, we'll also stop at Rondel, where I should have a meeting with city's council. What for? Asked Atami. That's none of your business, Lieutenant, answered Centurion. I've got my orders about that, and they're top secret, which I'm not authorized to tell you. Understood, sir, saluted Atami. So, aside me and Eric, who else go? My own team, answered Centurion, Haruka, Michiru and Setsuna. They'll provide the security details, in case things get complicated on the way. Aside from them, we'll also have two ghosts with us, Dalton Hibbert and Joe Booth, who'll back up the team. What about the rest of the ghosts, sir? Asked Eric. They've been already moved to Sedera, answered Centurion, under command of Scott. My second team of Shadow Warriors are also there with Colonel Fury, as well the 3rd Recon team, under command by Min. Min, surprised Atami, you've put him as my temporary replacement, sir. That's right, answered Centurion, as a former ghost, he's an excellent covert actions specialist we need to lead the 3rd Recon on this mission. Meanwhile, we've got our own duties by the orders of our superiors. This mission has been ordered by the leaders of the Big Three and the General Secretary of UN himself, so we're not allowed to screw it up, understand? Yes, sir, answered both Eric and Atami, standing straight. Good, said Centurion, now, get back to your quarters and get some sleep, we leave tomorrow at 10 o'clock hours. Dismissed. Are you really sure about that, Gray? Asked Pina. Yes, your highness, answered Gray, kneeling before the princess. My brother saw with his own eyes, as Zorzel's mistress Cassiopeia was meeting with the representative of Assassin Guild. So what she was doing there? Asked Pina. She was making a deal with the representative of the guild by showing him a sack of gold, answered Gray. Alexander said, that Cassiopeia promised to the representative, that the guild will be richly rewarded, if they'll achieve their mission and kill Sir Prime and Sir Hartman. That stupid fool, spat Pina. Sir Prime will be able to avoid the assassination on himself, but his superiors will be furious. They might destroy the Sedera in retaliation, all because of my brother's ego. I must stop this. Gray, you and Alexander are going to warn Sir Prime and Sir Hartman. Your job is to provide security to them until their safe return to Alnus. As you command, my princess, answered Gray. Good, said Pina, I'll talk with Ambassador Russell and Sir Sugawara about the situation, they'll arrange your transportation to Sir Prime's location. Let's go, there's no time to lose. We have the better part of 20,000 Imperial prisoners on this island, and these overbred, arrogant little jerks are the ones they want returned. Colonel Masters swore savagely as she read the 15 names on the list provided to her. Of course, not all of them were that bad. Unfortunately, the same political ties that had been used to get Viscount Mayo and several of the others, prestigious appointments in the Great Campaign, far in excess of their actual abilities were now at work, getting their parole now. Personally, Masters would have liked to have thrown the Viscount into the volcano and then deny she'd ever seen the creep. But failing that, at least he would be gone from her responsibility. It might have amused her to know that while she loathed and detested him, the Viscount loathed and feared her. That's right, Mayo hated the woman. To others, he merely said that Colonel Masters was proof of the irredeemable decadence and perversion of the off-world barbarians. She was no woman but a vile wench born from a society that could not grasp the fundamentals of civilization. Obviously, else they would have knelt before their betters. But privately, in his soul, in thoughts he did not dare share with others, Masters was worse than that. She was a monster. She had made him afraid, and he hated himself for being afraid of her, even as he hated her for making him feel that fear. He knew she was no natural woman, but in his heart, he believed she was not a woman at all, but a demon, and that demon had peered into his soul. It was with immense relief he crossed through the gate. And if he resented the guards who looked upon him with disdain instead of awe, he still thanked the gods that he had escaped the grasp of the demon. He noted, with relief, that at last noble rank and privilege was finally reasserting itself in his life as he recognized Marquis Calastra and General Mudra, two of his closest peers and comrades among those joining him. They silently agreed they would never discuss the humiliating circumstances of their capture, except to condemn the barbarians who had humiliated them. Not looking back, they left behind thousands of men who despised them as cowards, thousands of men who would also remember. After medical checks were completed by the newly arrived 865th CSH, Mayo and his comrades were cleared for travel beyond the gate. They were hurried onto a CH-53 for the flight to Sidera. It was also on their way. The Imperials have learned something that made them fear even more, the fact that the other worlders were able to kill Deirdrico and Aquadrico. Internally, Mayo's anger at the barbarians, pride warred with fear as even he realized what power would have been required to kill such a beast. Surely the gods would not allow such insolence to go unpunished. But the gods did not answer him, as the helicopters lifted off for Sidera. Prior to Helm's and others' arrival to Alnus, 2GI. Joe Tomahawks have lifted off, flying towards the Duma Mountains. In one of them, Sidid Atami, Eric, Rory, Lele, Tuca, Yao, Arpeggio and Mimosa, who were quite impressed by the power of their flying chariot. In the second, seated Centurion, Haruka, Michiru, Setsuna, Hibbert and Booth, who were acting as escorts for their VIPs. So, let me get this straight, said Hibbert, we're paying a visit to the local Hogwarts, sir. Rondel is more than just a Hogwarts, Hibbert, answered Centurion, it's also a training ground for all magicians in Falmart. In fact, there are 3 only cities, like Rondel, in Falmart, which served as the breeding ground for the land's magicians. So, calling Rondel a Hogwarts is like calling Las Vegas a bus stop in the desert. Sounds good to me, sir, said Booth. It wasn't long before they've reached the Rondel. They've stopped on the outside of the city, disembarked the Tomahawks and walked inside the city. Wow, gasped Eric, you wasn't kidding, Lele. See place is something, alright. Rondel was been established 300 years ago, said Lele. It was started as a school for magic, built by the demigods, Elrond and Law, who later became the gods of learning and knowledge. After that, many other sages and mages came to the school, thus starting to live here. And thus, the city was been created in honor of the 2 gods, who built it and became its guardians. I get it, said Booth, the name of the city, Rondel, is actually an anagram of the 2 gods' name, joined together. Yes, exactly, said Lele. In fact, the second city of magic, Linden, was been named as, of Rondel's origin, as it was been created as the second school of magic, except this one was for the beginners. Is that where you and Arpeggio first went, Lele-chan? Asked Setsuna. Exactly, answered Lele, now I'm gonna try to compete for Archmage. You mean, like for a title of professor? Asked Haruka. Not exactly, answered Lele. There are 3 stages of magic levels a magician must pass: Mage, Archmage and Sage. If I can compare these levels with your world, I'd say that Archmage level is for the docent, while Sage level is for the professors. I see, said Haruka. Hey, look. She pointed towards 2 kids, one of them was a cat girl. I see it, but I don't believe it, said Hibbert. It's like those 2 are in love with each other. That's because here, in Rondel, things are more different than the Empire, answered Lele. Alright, said Centurion, let's go find a place where we can stay before our trip to the city council. Prince Zorzel was actually quite happy to greet Herm Mayo and his other returning comrades, even if he resented the barbarians attempting to use them as political capital. Still, he politely smiled. he needed time. Time to organize and ready himself for the day he would deal with all of his enemies. I almost have everything in place, he admitted, as he sat on the edge of his bed. Once father is out of the way, the real power would finally be mine. Behind him, Vendetta smiled. Zorzel's reaction was one of puzzlement and mild annoyance, not full anger. Zorzel was still a crude and ill-tempered brat, but he was somewhat pliable. He also had a huge ego, which she was becoming adept at stroking. This was partially how she had managed to keep him from pulling his little scheme on the Emperor. Not that she cared one way or the other for Molt, but the timing left much to be desired. You've long been ready to rule, my prince. But we must ready the Empire to follow your leadership. You are a lion among sheep. Zorzel grinned. Cassiopeia was correct, of course. How foolish of him to think only of himself. He was destined by the gods for greatness, but his people were still only ordinary men of imperfect flesh. They needed to be guided so when the time came, they would follow him without fail. How true. And you? Are you ready to follow my every command? Without hesitation, my prince. Of course, the real truth of the matter was that she needed time. Zorzel had been quite enthusiastic about the return of his cherished companions and associates, but Vendetta was considerably cooler about it. She needed to know how they would interact with and influence Zorzel. Cassiopeia now saw the wisdom in her mother's teachings. She would watch how Zorzel interacted with his old companions and make very certain that they bent to him. It would be so inconvenient to her plans for others to be bending Zorzel's ear. Speaking of which, Your Highness, have you had the opportunity to consider that little project I asked you about? She solicited mildly as she began massaging his back. Ah, yes, your idea of knight order of our own. I think, it does have the merit, comparing to Pina and her girly knights. We shall have the real men, ready to serve the Empire. What did you call it? The Order of the Kestrel, he smiled in amusement. He never had patience with falconry, but it seemed harmless enough. Yes, my prince. Princess Pina have her knights, but they're just pretty women, who pretending to be the knights. If we want to restore the Empire to its glory, then I fail to see why you cannot sponsor an order to mold the next generation of the real men, who will also serve you with the same unswerving loyalty. They'll be the real knights, unlike Pina's pretenders. And I see your brother will have a high place among the young men in this order. Of course, Cassiopeia readily agreed. She made no attempt to hide her loyalty to her brother. Who else would lead your new order, than the man, who swore to you with his life, Your Highness? Of course, the part about inspiring loyalty to Zorzel was utter nonsense, but loyal men who would support and protect the heir she hoped to bring forth was tantamount. And they would need to be men of better quality than those Prince Zorzel kept as companions. Furthermore, her current position had moved her into a position to better know just exactly what mess the Empire currently found itself in. She had already heard some proposals by some of Zorzel's stalwarts to lower the age for military service, and this did not give her any comfort. If she could not dissuade such lunacy, then at least Hadrian could be properly trained. With luck, it could become an honor guard, loyal only to her. Unknown to all this, Zorzel smirked. Very well then, my dear. I will entrust you to handle it. Do a good job. Always, my lord. Centurion walked to the room in the hotel and knocked. Come in, he heard it and entered. Inside, he was Lele wearing new clothing. Wow, you looking fancy, he said. Are those the scholar uniform for competition? Yes, said Lele, these clothing are for those who compete for the Archmage title. Except that, if I fail, they'll throw ink on me, and I'll be forced to wear such clothing as a sign for my dishonor. Whoa, said Eric, these people sure don't give ya fail degree. Don't worry, said Centurion, nothing will happen to you, Lele, it all depends on what you've learned in our world and yours. So, are you ready? Lele blushed, hearing Centurion's words. Yes, she said. Then let's go, said Centurion. Antonia beamed as she bathed her new son in the sacred fountain. The piles of gold given to the temple and to others meant nothing to her. Her late husband had openly scorned her for going to the temples, long had he blamed the gods for her barren womb. Antonia knew that he had planned to cast her aside as soon as he got back from the conquests. Well, the gods had smiled on her. They had seen to it that her husband now soldiered the Legion of the Dead, and now she used his gold to obtain the son that he could never have given her. Ironic that it was her husband's contacts who had brought her this treasure. In her heart she knew the man had been a devil who consorted with devils, and perhaps she was no better because it was a devil's bargain she had made, but Antonia only knew that she wanted, and Decimus had promised to provide for that want. The cost had been high enough in gold, paid every month until the baby's birth. She told herself in a part of her soul she did not want to face that her gold had been a salvation to both the birth mother and to her unborn child. Of course, every month, Decimus had found excuse to justify demanding even more gold than before, by pointing out that if he didn't maintain the rest of his slaves as well, jealousy might cause one of them to harm the pregnant mother. Certainly he would punish such a slave, but it only took a moment and the damage would be done, and Antonia could not take that risk, even if she knew that most of the gold that went into the man's fat, greasy palms would not be used for the purposes stated. But again, it had never been about the gold. Nor did it matter in the past few weeks when Decimus had begun to look very nervous, like a fat old hog passing near a lion's den. He had actually stopped demanding as much gold and instead began begging her to talk to her uncle, Senator Ducey, for protection from this, Spartacus. Gold, influence. These were merely tools to be used, and so she agreed. She ruthlessly suppressed these thoughts as she beheld the beautiful child before her. She marveled at his perfect features, the bright, curious eyes of her son as she watched him. Myrrhida has seen fit to grant you a handsome son, the priestess smiled. What will you name him? Antonia smiled. There was a very old name passed down from legends from beyond the founding. By the will of Myrrhida and before all the gods, I name him Aeneas. As Centurion's group were walking through the city, they've been watching on the structure of Rondel's educations and research. That building over there is the conference, where the presentation will be held, said Lele, pointing towards the huge building. That one is city council. Then that's where me and Mimosa are gonna go, said Centurion. And what's over there? It's the district of research and development, answered Lele. Is that where all those professors are working on their theories? Asked Atami. They stay secluded, answered Lele. What? Surprised Eric. Secluded. Suddenly, an explosion hurtled from the building. Shit, cursed Eric, son of a bitch. Don't tell me, that's one of those professors just blown his own lab. My formula, hurtled someone's voice, it's been blown to bits. My thesis is soaked, cried another, I've been working for months on this. My sample, cried another. Whose laboratory is that? Yelled another voice. Then another explosion hurtled, following by Fountain. No, cried another man, my research is gone. What have you done? Screamed another man, what are you doing? Then another explosion occurred. Not again, cried another, my whole months of work, down the drain. A shower of water washed over poor Yao, who didn't like it. Jesus Christ, said Eric, helping Yao to dry up her hair, what are they developing there? PTSD for everyone. Yup, said Centurion, welcome to another episode of the Dexter's Lab. So that's why you lived with your grandparents outside Kota village, Lele-chan, asked Michiru. Yes, exactly, said Lele. Well, we better get into the city council, said Centurion. You guys find yourself an inn and get some chow, mimosa, and I will be back. Right, sir, answered Setsuna. Back at the tailor's party, they've finally neared the estate of Lady Agrippina. Agrippina hungrily expecting the coming reunion. Lord Octavius, she exclaimed, gesturing to the fields beyond. Look and behold, the lands of my family. All of this has belonged to us for centuries. It may not be as vast as the lands of House Octavius, but our vineyards produce some of the finest wines in the empire. She laughed. You would not think it from my rather poor first impression, my lord, but with my father spending almost all of his time in Sidera these days, I know quite a fair amount of running the family concerns. Her expression turned dark. A lesson my father made abundantly clear is that to yield a good crop, one must be diligent in removing pests and vermin. Today is a good day to begin setting my house right. As they rode closer, she began to recognize the faces of some of the workers. They, in turn, recognized her, and their faces displayed the shock of her return from beyond the realm of the dead. One older man, in particular, began speaking frantically in popularity that his lady should not judge or punish them too hard, for they had all been told she had been killed by the barbarians, months ago. Agrippina laughed in genuine amusement at this as she replied in popularity. As you can see, I am very much alive. But you who have worked these lands and loyally served my family have certainly done me no ill. No, I have no intention to raise my hand against you. The scoundrel who sits in my home and fancies himself a lord, however. I shall be having words with him shortly. She raised her voice for all to hear. I wish my return to be a surprise for my lord within. None shall inform his lordship. I shall tell him all he needs to know. Yes, my lady, the old man replied. Good. Agrippina turned to Taylor. My lord, the manor house awaits. He gestured for her to lead the way. Knight Guinevere riding behind the two of them while Kalua and Marisa each took two of her comrades of the Blue Rose with them on the flanks. Nayu, for her part, was making strides in learning how to master her own mount, despite elves generally not being known for their equestrian skills, as she had no intention of riding in an iron carriage while Aurelia, who had been trained to ride by her father starting at an early age, rode alongside their shared consort-to-be. It was not, she told herself firmly, a sign of insecurity but of propriety. Both she and Aurelia had pledged to stand with Taylor and protect him from harm, and Nayu could hardly do that from inside a truck. Riders inbound, Kalua called as she spotted the two approaching cavalry troopers. Taylor tensed slightly. If the riders were from one of the garrison units scattered about, then things would probably be just fine, as at Panasha's suggestion, Kalua carried a writ signed and bearing Princess Pina's seal, authorizing her to compel the cooperation of Imperial troops in the conduct of her mission. Again, like the orders Her Highness had left with Panache, the authority of the third Imperial Princess would be more than sufficient as long as there were no conflicting orders from His Imperial Majesty or one of the Imperial Princes. Technically, Pina's orders could also be countered by written orders from Claudia, the second Imperial Princess, but Taylor understood that the elder princesses had come out on the short end of one of the Imperial family's internal power plays, and their direct influence in the Empire had been considerably diminished. Of course, there was the possibility that the riders were part of a mercenary unit or other force of private retainers. Then things could get interesting, but as it was, the incoming riders recognized the armor and standard of Imperial knights and drew up in front of Kalua. Who goes there? I am Kalua, a knight of Her Imperial Highness's Order of the Rose, she replied in a voice of firm authority. And who might you be? I am Centurion Gracchus County Linus, the officer announced loudly. What is your business here? And he gestured to the vehicles behind her. Who are these people? Attached to what unit, Centurion? Kalua demanded instead. If he thought he was going to intimidate her, he was seriously mistaken. 3rd Cohort, 8th Legion, under Legate Marius. I insist you answer my questions. Something pricked at the back of his neck. Perhaps if he had been further forward during the Battle of Ginza, instead of supervising the looting of the shops nearest the gate, he might have recognized the iron carriages of the Green Men, or if he and the other survivors of the 8th had been held at Alnus, or if Legate Marius had not cited to Senator Godison that his command was completely unfit for battle, having lost most of its numbers in a valiant rearguard action and missed the second battle at Alnus, then he might have better understood the situation, but as it was, all he knew was a ball of ice forming in his gut. You insist? Kalua scoffed lightly. Very well. This is Lord Octavius. He and his retainers have graciously consented to help us escort the Lady Agrippina home to her estate. Kalua noted that while the trooper accompanying him now turned to look at Agrippina with a mix of surprise and curiosity, the centurion was rapidly losing the color in his face. Impossible, he proclaimed. The legate's wife died months ago. Oh, I assure you, Centurion, Agrippina now spoke almost conversationally. I am quite alive. She showed the trooper her signet ring. I will be reclaiming my house today. Accompany us. Her tone was not a request. Listening in from one of the Marine Humvees, Lance Corporal Peterson turned to one of his squadmates. Are all the women in this world badasses? Sergeant Davis smirked, gesturing towards Kalua. And that one wants to take you home to mama. Ain't you a lucky bastard? Pa always said, a gal that knows her mind is either your best ally or your worst enemy. You just gotta choose which one she's gonna be. Amen, that. Davis agreed as the two Imperials fell in behind Agrippina, and that there ain't a woman scorned. She's pissed. I got me a wife with a shopping addiction and I'm paying too much for a car I ain't never even sat in, but I'll take my lot a million times over the poor sap we're about to drop in on. The rest of the ride-in was fairly calm and Lady Agrippina was soon rewarded with the delighted look of recognition on the face of Maxius. The major domo had loyally served her family since she was in swaddling. "My lady, you've come home," Maxius exclaimed, speaking in Satyrian high tongue. She regarded the old man fondly. "A little late but yes, Maxius. I'm home at last. Tell me, how have you fared these long days?" Maxius lowered his head. "Forgive an old man the prejudices of his opinions, but my lady's spouse consorts with swine. I realize it is above my station to comment upon the habits of his lordship, but—" He looked at Agrippina helplessly, unwilling to overstep his bounds though clearly wishing to say more. "Dear Maxius," Agrippina said, switching to popularity, "come. Tell me everything that has transpired in my home. I can trust no one more. And if my so-called husband consorts with swine, then it is because he has proven himself a swine as well. I know you have been too loyal to me to speak it, but you know it. And now, so do I. You never liked him, did you? The truth, my lady. Always. No. His eyes should have been more on you and less on your home." "Where is he now?" she asked gently. "He is in the master suite," the old man answered. "He has started bedding the daughter of a merchant." "Does she eye my home as well?" "No. She has eyes only upon his lordship. He regales her with lies of strength and courage." Agrippina laughed ruefully. "I suppose I can hardly blame her. I was as foolish myself, Maxius," she smiled, gesturing to the knights and companions behind her. She resumed speaking in high tongue. "These people have gracefully escorted me home and now we are going to set my house right. His lordship will not be staying long, I think. Oh, Maxius, I have missed you dearly. Shall I announce you, my lady?" "Oh, no, 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 don't be so rudely, Maxius. That'll ruin the whole surprise. I've got something much better for that. I'll announce myself. But please be a dear and get a bottle of the good wine. This is a day for celebration." Maxius nodded. "Of course, my lady. Some of the 47, I think." He then realized that his lady had changed while she had been away. More confident, more certain of her own course. Gone was the willful girl who seemed to be looking for an anchor. His lady was filled with purpose and focus, and in his heart, Maxius praised the gods. Agrippina stalked upstairs, with Taylor, Aurelia, Naiu, Kalua, and Genevieve trailing behind her. Sergeant Davis, Corporal Peterson, and the Seabees Lieutenant Ramsey brought up the rear, just for good measure. The door to the master suite was closed but not locked. After all, who would dare to invade the privacy of their lordship without a very good reason? Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, finding the man she once loved with his back to her, astride a pretty, young girl. So engrossed in his pleasures, the legate had not even registered the door opening. Stepping to the fireplace, Agrippina seized up a poker. "Honey," she said loudly, "I'm home." Turning to her, Legate Marius screamed in horror, as he was seeing what appeared to be the ghost of his dead wife. "No," he shouted, "go away. Go back to Hardy's realm, where you belong." "Why such a rude gesture, Marius, dear?" Agrippina said sarcastically. "Aren't you glad to see your wife finally returning to her home?" "No," screamed Marius, "you're just a ghost. My wife is dead." "Really?" snorted Agrippina. "If I'm a ghost, then can I do this?" She then snatched hold of his hair with her free hand and yanked hard off the bed, causing him to slide, crashing off the bed. "Cowardly swine," she spat, "you've left me behind the gate and run away, claiming that I've perished. And after that, you've taken my home and my name, even renouncing our relations. For this, I shall knight you." As she released her grip, she struck him in the side of the head with the poker. Even as servants and soldiers hurried into the room to be met with two imperial knights with hands on their swords, Lady Agrippina continued to pass her judgment on the legate. "I name thee Sir Coward," she said, hitting him on the head with a poker. "I name thee Duke of Liars and Baron of Thieves. You've once fooled me, babbling about your so-called bravery, yet you runned away, like a kobold, leaving me to the fate from other worlders. You thought Tehi would finish me. Think again, you snake." She then kicked him in the face, making Marius fly to the wall. "It was you who declared that the bonds between us are broken," she snarled. "Now I want you out of my house. Now." Taylor, Aurelia and Naiu all watched with satisfaction as Agrippina stood over the bloody, terrified, and sobbing form of the man she had once happily called husband. Though they were there to make sure no one interfered, no one did. While some individuals, like the accompanying Rose Knights, looked on in approval, others, whether allied or opposed to Marius, viewed the carnage with varying degrees of discomfort and possibly nausea. Agrippina then turned her attention back to the other men present, taking their measure with her gaze. Those that had been with the legate on that day in Tokyo watched with fear and even horror while the rest looked on mostly in disgust. Even the girl whom Agrippina's former spouse had been bedding and grooming as her replacement now looked at him in disgust as she clutched the bed sheet around her. Agrippina glanced over at her and the hate in her eyes faded for a moment as she regarded this girl. She looked to one of the servant girls. "You, what is your name?" The servant curtsied. "I am Marin, my lady." "Marin, take this girl from here and get her properly dressed. It is unseeming for one of my ladies in waiting to be wearing a sheet." She turned to the girl and smiled slightly. "Follow Marin, my dear. We will talk later about many things. I have learned much in the past several months and I intend to teach this knowledge to you." Agrippina watched with approval as Marin led the girl from the room, then looked at the men, the ones she still considered men at least. "But my first lesson is not for her," the iron returned to her voice although not the hate. She looked to one young man whose expression of distaste for his lord was readily apparent. It was clear he was restraining himself from bodily attacking the pathetic man in front of him. This one, from reading his face as she spoke, was one of the first to realize just what his lord had done and the extent of his cowardice. Perhaps he was a little smarter than average. "You," she said to him in that same voice of steel. "What is your name?" "I am Decanus Fabius County Gallus, my lady," the young man replied promptly and in respectful tones. "Come here, Fabius County Gallus," Agrippina said, ignoring the broken meatbag whom she had once fawned upon. As the young man complied and knelt before her, she extended her hand, displaying the signet of her house, her intention clear. The young man obediently kissing it. She smiled in satisfaction. "At my side and at my will, I can make any man here a lord." She now returned her glance to her husband, the disgust she felt returned to her face but strangely now devoid of anger. "What I've learned is that I also have the power to unmake that man as well. Through his deeds, you, my former husband, had declared that the ties of our marriage are no longer binding us. So be it, Decanus. As a lady of the empire, I command that you remove this filth from my house. And all who would side with him, will now leave and never return." She looked down upon her now, ex-husband once more. "As for you, rat," she then spat to him, "I leave you with your life as it is, above your so-called honor, and every other virtue, which you don't have. If you think I am unfair, then perhaps we should travel to speak to the emperor. I am certain everyone will get exactly what they have coming. Now, get your butt out of my house." "So, how's your talk with the city council went, Commander?" asked Rory, as she and others seated with Centurion and Mimosa in the city inn. "Well, I can't tell you that," answered Centurion, "that's top secret, Rory. Let's just say, I've learned a lot of things about the city's politics and gained some new allies to ANF. But right now, that's not important. Mimosa here was helping me to understand about my theory about Falmart." "What theory, sir?" asked Setsuna. "It's about all those living things in the continent," answered Centurion, "and it all connected to one thing, the gate. After I've parted with Rory years ago," said Mimosa, "I've traveled a lot around the world, searching for the answers. I've searched through various ruins and texts, starting with those, who were left by the elves, who inhabited the continent years ago, as well reading of various races' origins, searching for their genesis stories, and it all pointed to the Alnus Hill. You see, Falmart is like a fertile garden for all the races and creatures, that arrived here from their home worlds. For example, the story of the elves' genesis said about the man and a woman, who'd been led by a god to the forest of origin. Each elven culture have their different story, but all of them have the same thing about the forest of origin. When you ask the elves of the north, where is this forest of origin, they point to the south, and when you ask the elves of the south, they point to the north. And all leads to one place, the Alnus Hill. In fact, all other creatures, like kobolds or beastmen, point to the place of their origins to Alnus Hill. But of course, not every one of them get to return to their native world, so they stay here, thus becoming part of this world as well. Usually, after 100 or 1,000 years, the gate appears on Alnus, allowing other inhabitants of their world to enter into Falmart. Sometime they engage into war, other time they fall in love with other species, thus becoming part of the society. Then, the gate returns to its slumber, allowing those, who crossed the gate, to breed more of their fruit, which added a new form of tapestry to the world. That cycle was been repeated for centuries. I get that, said Michiru, but what about the apostles? According to what we've learned, the Empire wasn't allowed to march into the Alnus Hill without blessing from apostles. That's true, said Rory. Usually, we act as gardeners to the humanity. Sometimes we act as guides to those, who seek the truth and justice, otherwise, we cut the branches, that grown too big or became rotten. That's how we maintain the balance in this world. And what about the Alnus? Asked Haruka. Why aren't no one has allowed to enter without a blessing from a god? Because it's also the place of origins of not just other species, answered Rory, but gods as well. Considering that Alnus practically stands on the domain of underworld, it's no wonder that it's forbidden for other species to even come close to the Alnus. Sometimes the gods sends their emissaries through the gate to invite new species into Falmart, but sometimes, she then cringes, that stupid Hardy allows the warlords to come into this world, just for her amusement. But why then the gods have allowed Hardy to open the gate to Ginza? Asked Atami, and why they wanted to send Zumfut's apostle there. I think, we can learn that piece of the puzzle in Belnargo, answered Centurion. What about the conference? Asked Tuka. It's only 2 days before it, answered Lele, we should have enough time to get to Belnargo and return. Sounds good to me, said Haruka. With Tomahawk, we can reach Belnargo in short time, then be back to Rondel just in time of the conference. By the way, Lele-chan, what exactly are you wanna to present there? The art of flying, answered Lele. The what? Everyone gasped. I've been studying on how the other worlders' flying machines work, said Lele, as well how they manage to fly into the air. If I chant my spell into my scepter, I'll be able to fly by using its power the same way the other worlders' jets are using their fire engines. You mean, turbines? Asked Eric. Exactly, said Lele, with enough speed, I'll be able to stay airborne for at least several hours. That's great, Lele-chan, said Haruka, but I'll bet, you're after more than just flying by using your scepter. That's right, said Lele, I've been searching through internet and found several devices that was been experimented for flying. But Lele-chan, said Setsuna, those prototypes are still in development stages because they've never been tested yet. But maybe, said Centurion, if we can combine Lele's magic with our science, we can actually make those prototypes become the real machines. Think about it, guys, having your own sky cycle, like in Star Wars. Or your personal jet pack, said Haruka. Or an aircar, said Eric. Wait, said Atami, aren't you GI? Joes already have that stuff. Those are just models developed for battlefield only, answered Centurion. We're talking about the devices that could be used by any normal being even today. Whoa, really? Gasped Atami, that sounds great, sir. I'd say, Lele must succeed. Great, mumbled Arpeggio, my little sister has outpasses me again. But you don't need to be so gloomy, Arpeggio-san, said Setsuna. What do you mean that, Lady Mayo? Asked Arpeggio. It's simple, explained Setsuna, Lele is good with the technological stuff, but your speciality is minerals and geology. You should stick to that. There are numerous minerals in our world that can be found, so they could be great in today's industry. Your research in minerals could actually help a lot of humans in our world, Arpeggio-san. Really? Squeaked Arpeggio, thank you, Lady Mayo. You're welcome, Arpeggio-san, smiled Setsuna. Strike leader, this is Eagle, come in, suddenly Hibbard's voice herded in Centurion's headset, come in, strike leader. This is strike leader, answered Centurion, what's going on, Eagle? You better get back into hotel, sir, said Hibbard, we've just got a tip, that there's a bunch of assassins in town, and they're after you and Lieutenant Hartman. Assassins, gasped Atami. After me, growled Eric. We better get back to the hotel, said Centurion, getting up and pulling out his pistol. Haruka, Michiru, Setsuna, protect the VIPs. Let's go. Zorzel sat in his study, indulging in the sweet wine which had fallen out of favor among many of Sedera's elite. He could still see the burning of his palace. The barbarians would pay for that, Zorzel promised himself. Except, as it stood, they probably wouldn't. With the death of the Aquadrico, that's been literally dropped from heaven by the other worlders, half of the Senate was ready to fall all over itself to surrender to the savages. Once proud and noble Saterans were standing around waiting like eunuchs as the barbarians planned to geld the whole of the empire. No, worse than that, these men were complicit, holding the empire down and splayed open for the barbarians, knives. It was to be expected that barbarians, who, not possessing the intelligence to understand the greatness of the empire, would seek to harm it. These enemies were natural, even if they lacked all understanding of proper behavior and conduct. Far worse to Zorzel were the traitors within the empire. Whether beguiled by barbarian lies or simply lacking in spine, they were betraying the empire. His empire. Worse, was the thought that his father, and how he had come to despise the weak man he had become, might yet deny him the throne that was rightfully his. That could not be allowed to happen. So far, he had humored vendetta by holding his peace. She was correct, after all, that work needed to be done to restore the proper spirit to the empire. She was truly worthy of being his consort. But she was still a woman, and still thus blind to certain truths that he saw plainly. History was made of moments and great men who seized their moment to shape the world. Not recorded were the lesser men who had been offered their own chances for greatness but had failed to seize their opportunity. Zorzel was aware that fate had presented him with his own moment to take hold, but every window in history was brief and his window was starting to pass. Once the moment was lost, there was no getting it back. No, he would not let his moment slip beyond his reach. He had waited long enough. The time to act was now. Zorzel finished his drink and called for Quiris. There was work to be done. Or you're saying, that Zorzel has hired the assassins from the guild to kill me and Eric, said Centurion, as he seated in the hotel room with the rest of his group and their visitors. That's correct, Sir Prime, said Alexander. We've learned that Prince Zorzel has formed a pact with the Guild of Assassins by putting a price of 100 golden swans on your head, as well 50 swans on Sir Hartman's head. Why's my head is so little priced? Snorted Eric. Maybe because you're a lieutenant, not the general, answered Atami. Fuck you, snorted Eric. Shut up, Jarhead, barked Haruka. Go ahead, gentlemen. We know, they're in Rondel, said Gray. They've been tasked to kill you two and bring your heads to Prince Zorzel. That stupid egohead, growled Eric. I'd say, we go to Sedera and kick his ass. No, Eric, answered Centurion, in case if you're forgotten, we're on the assignment by President's orders. Whatever Zorzel has planned for us, it'll have to wait. First, we need to get to Belnargo for that summit. We've received the letter. The letter? Surprised Gray. What kind of a letter is that, Sir Prime? Centurion then took out the scroll and unfolded before the two brothers, making them shocked. This, muttered shocked Gray, as he kneeled before the letter. This is the letter from the High Priest of Temple of Hardy in Belnargo. That's right, said Centurion, folding the scroll, and we've been summoned there by Flare and other gods, who want to tell us something really important. Now do you understand, why we don't have time to deal with Zorzel's assassins? Yes, Sir Prime, said Gray, getting up, we would like to participate as well, as the representatives of the Empire and Princess Pina. Agreed, said Centurion, you two can come with us by tomahawks. We better leave soon, before those assassins come here looking for us. Get ready, everyone, we're leaving tonight. Chapter 35, God's Judgment and Assassination Attempt. With the Sateran Empire already on edge by the ANF's recent actions, the Allied Nations Forces Command has decided that the Imperial leadership should be given one final push to pursue peace talks. Ever since the war had begun almost a month ago, the ANF had done its very best to disrupt the Empire's ability to wage war, both physically and more importantly, mentally. The commanders of the ANF had learned very quickly that the Empire was not able to comprehend the way how the member nations fought in combat. The Empire was unable to compete with the shows of force and tactics that was not seen on Earth since the fall of the Roman Empire, which, as it turned out, was quite similar to the Sateran Empire in many other ways. Meanwhile, the coalition had been able to attack and destroy numerous imperial slave towns, assassinate or capture high-ranking members of the imperial court and even isolate Sidera itself from any potential allies, all within less than a month. All of these actions and more had proved to be devastating to the psyche of the imperial population and their leaders. No one was safe, no matter their rank or standing in the empire, not even the members of the imperial family themselves. No one had even dared attack the empire for centuries, yet the other worlders had managed to cripple the mighty imperial military in short order. But even after all these failures, the empire still showed no signs of wanting to talk, let alone accept the coalition's terms of surrender. There was a quite strong peace faction within the imperial senate, but the ANF leadership, though said faction needed a little boost to their cause and justification to seek peace. That faction needed justification for their calls for peace so their voices could be heard and taken real seriously. Unfortunately, their voices were still low due to the warmongers and imperial military leaders' support for war. At the same time, the days which left to the empire by the ANF's ultimatum have passed, but neither the Emperor Molt nor the Senate was showing any signs of making their decision about the peace talks, which left the ANF commanders with one last option to make the empire finally decide whether they want peace or war. Over the last few days, Reaper drones had been conducting recon flights between Alnus and the imperial capital, as a part of continuous mapping operations. Locating and identifying numerous imperial outposts and forts in the process, specifically in the mountain range located 15 miles away from Sidera itself. These forts were built both to protect the many roads and pathways that linked Sidera with the outlying provinces, as well as provide resting spots for those who traveled along them. Obviously, these mountain roads were not as important as the canals that linked Sidera with the rest of the continent, but they were important enough for the empire to build forts to protect them. These were forts which could easily hold up to 1,000 men each and had enough supplies to keep each one of them fed for months. If those forts were to be destroyed, it could have been another major blow to imperial morale and deny the imperial army the Duma Mountains passes they protected. There were also a number of military facilities and dragon pens, which were located throughout the imperial capital itself. Facilities that were associated to certain noble houses who held strong support for the imperial family. Hitting these targets would be another huge blow for the imperial government. At the same time, intelligence has reported about fresh troops arriving to Sidera from other provinces. All this has left the ANF command to finally authorize the aerial operation codename, Rolling Thunder, in effect, to finally cripple the Empire's military strength and to show the Emperor and the Senate that the ANF do mean business. Before the operation, the EC-130J-30 Commando solo planes, who's been operating in accordance to psychological warfare, had flown to the Sidera and dropped several leaflets. To Emperor Molt and the members of Imperial Senate, you have been given 10 days to make up your mind, either do you want to surrender or continue this war. Those days have passed, yet your mind is not made up. In accordance to the warning we've been giving you, we will now begin the peace enforcement operation to finally make you see that we didn't give empty threats. At the 3 a.m. of Sateran time, we shall destroy all your important military facilities in Sidera and in Duma Mountains. After that, you have exactly 24 hours to finally make your decision to make peace with the allied nations or continue this war. Should you not make the decision to comply to our demands, it will be considered as your decision to continue the war. After the 24 hours deadline, we shall begin the full-scale assault on Sidera. You have been warned, now the choice is yours, either peace or war. You want the war, you shall have it, and may your gods have mercy on your souls, because we're certainly not. Naturally, of course, neither the senators nor Molt himself didn't believe this warning, because they believed that no one would be capable of attacking Sidera, because it was been too far from Alnus. Many of them were laughing at the threats of other worlders, not even knowing that soon, their laughter will be turned into fear. Only several members of the imperial family knew that the other worlders are really serious, mostly Pina, because ambassadors Russell and Sugawara had warned her about the upcoming ANF's operation, but none of the upper population didn't listen to her. Many of them had ridiculed Pina, saying that she's just a foolish girl who's scared of her own shadow. This had only angered Pina, who spat to them that she's no longer care about their fate, and when the other worlders strike, they should not blame her for trying to warn them. She then returned back to Jade Palace, while the nobles were laughing at her, unaware that after this night, they'll be wishing that they should listen to her. The sun had long gone down in the east, as Alness airfield was abuzz with activity. Ground crews belonging to the various Allied nations' countries, who brought aircraft across the gate, were busily preparing their combat aircraft for the coming operation. American ground crews carefully fitted their F-18s with JDAMs and Rockeye-2 cluster bombs, while Indian crews fitted their Su-30s with GBU-12 paveways and other MP-similar munitions. In another hangar, recently arrived Filipino Fa-50 inches Golden Eagles were being fitted with Hydra 70 rocket pods under each wing, while Japanese F-2s were being fueled up and readied for their pilots. Ghost Eye and Lancaster E-2D AWACs had taken off to monitor the airspace between Alness and Sidera itself, while the gunships Warhammer and Snake Eater were already on their way to the imperial capital and would arrive just in time to take part in the operation. By 21:45 hours, the pilots arrived at their aircraft and were helped into their respective aircraft by their ground crews. They had all been briefed about the operation and given specifics about their individual objectives. The ultimate goal, though, was to cause as much damage and confusion among the Imperial troops. That was their primary goal, and every single pilot knew it as they climbed into their cockpits and closed the canopy to their respective aircraft. The high-pitched whining of the jet engines signaled that each aircraft were ready, as they slowly began to emerge from their hangars like predators heading out for that night's kill. Their thunderous roars could be heard all the way to Alnestown, where the residents had grown used to the sounds. But that did not stop many of them from venturing to one of the smaller hills that overlooked the air base, as the otherworlder flying contraptions were always a sight to see. Children yelled in delight as the first flight consisting of F-2 Vipers shot off into the night sky. The blue flames illuminating each aircraft for a brief moment, before they flew out of eyesight. An event that was repeated numerous times over the next half hour, as other elements of the Allied nations' air forces took off into the night and towards their individual targets. It was another moonless night over the imperial capital, as a group of drunken imperial soldiers made their way through the cobblestone streets of the city. These particular men members of the 12th Army of the House of Harkonnen and had recently arrived from the Guide-Provence after 3 months of marching. The House of Harkonnen, though one of the more minor noble houses in the imperial court, was by far the most loyal to the imperial family. A loyalty that was brought centuries ago when Emperor Padishah Company Shaddam gave the House of Harkonnen exclusive rights to the trade routes in the Araxes Desert, where items such as the valuable and exotic spices were acquired from the many towns and villages where they were cultivated and made. A commodity many said was worth more than gold, and under the House of Harkonnen, the spice flowed. It was this monopoly on spice trade that made the Harkonnen very wealthy, one of the richest families in the western provinces, even though they were one of the smaller houses overall in the empire. They were also one of the few houses in that region to have their own army who swore loyalty to the House Harkonnen. But when Emperor Molt requested more the assistance from the noble houses to reinforce the imperial army, Harkonnen did not waste any time in sending almost 20,000 men to the capital itself to defend the empire. A force that took 3 weeks to arrive and set up camp just outside the city walls when they finally arrived. But after such a long march, the officers decided to allow their men to relax and enjoy whatever Sidera had to offer them. For many, this was the first time they had left Guide-Provence and had only heard stories about just what the city had to offer. So anyone can imagine just what sort of horrors the men of the 12th subjected the population since their arrival, especially those who lived in the lower rings of the city. It was after one of these excursions into the city, that found this group men trying to navigate their way back to their camp. The streets were empty, as most of Sidera's residents were in their homes fast asleep. The last few days had been a very trying time for the residents, with the great shake and rumors of the otherworlders already infiltrating Sidera itself. The city was already on edge over the war and the apparent numerous defeats of the supposedly mighty imperial army. The arrival of the armies of the great western noble houses did little to ease the nerves of the population of Sidera, let alone convince them that Sidera would be victorious. Even though they never said it, it was a general and spoken belief that it was not a matter of if the otherworlders would attack the capital, but when. As the group staggered through the dimly tidal streets, the cold night air was suddenly filled with the distant sound of thunder. But as they looked up, the Harkonnen soldiers were met with a clear sky filled with stars that shined brightly in the night sky. However, was odd, is that it was a clear night yet they continued to hear thunder. For a brief moment, one of the men could have sworn he saw a star shoot across the sky at a high rate of speed, but paid it no attention due to his intoxicated state of mind. But little did he or his companions realize that their night of celebration would be their last, as the building they stood next to suddenly exploded into a massive fireball that quickly engulfed them all, leaving nothing behind to suggest they had even been there to begin with. The building itself had been identified by the ANF intelligence as being a warehouse the Imperial Army used to store large quantities of food for their troops, a fact discovered thanks to the effort of Filipino scout rangers taking part in Operation Shadow, and which marked it as a target for ANF airstrikes. But no sooner that the building was been hit, another explosion rocked the capital as a barracks belonging to the city's home guard was struck by a pair of JDAMs. Instantly killing hundreds of Imperial soldiers and wounding many more, while the building itself was gutted by the resulting fires. By now, the entire city was on alert as coalition aircraft continued their attack on the city and the surrounding Imperial encampments. Another JDAM struck one of the dragon pens and killed several dragons, while many more fled into the night never to return to their handlers. In the camp of House Harkonnen, cluster bombs made short work of the assembled force, killing hundreds including Baron Vladimir Harkonnen himself, who had been personally leading his troops since they left Gidi. It was now absolute chaos in the Imperial city, as many of the surviving troops ran around like headless chickens. No one was giving orders and no one knew just what in Hardy's name was going on. Some tried to dig out their comrades from under the rubble, others tried desperately to put out the flames before they could spread. It was anarchy. The civilian population in the upper levels looked on in absolute shock and horror as more explosions rocked the city. Many of them has realized that the other worlders' warning was all true, and Princess Pina did tried to warn them about the upcoming attack, yet they didn't listen to them. Many of the nobles were now scared to death, believing that the other worlders might be turning their wrath against their own houses. Some of their women has gone completely hysterical, while others yelling to load the carriages to flee the city. In other words, it was absolute chaos in upper levels. But while the upper-class citizens trembled in fear and fully panicked, the residents of the Akusho district looked on in disbelief and wonder. Not fear, not hate, not even in disgust, just in wonder. A ominous orange glow could be seen by all the residents of Akusho, coming from the upper levels. For a long time, many of them had wished they could have lived in those levels and away from the property that surrounded them every day of their lives. But as another explosion rocked the capital again, they were more thankful than ever that the other worlders were targeting the very same people who had looked down on them for so long. However, while most were transfixed by the fires that burned in the city, others were more perplexed by the flashes of light appearing on the Duma Mountains in the distance. Just as planned, the ANF jets and gunships also pounded the Imperial fortresses in the Duma Mountains. Filipino Golden Eagles and Indian Su-30s used the natural environments to destroy the Imperial fortifications, by causing entire mountainsides to collapse onto the massive stone structures and bury them in tons of rock. Snake Eater also took part in the assault the only way it could, sending 105mm rounds into Imperial forts with pinpoint accuracy. Following up with 40mm and minigun fire and finishing off what the fast jets had started. In less than 2 hours, the ANF had dealt a devastating blow to both the Imperial military and its people. Hundreds or even thousands of soldiers were dead and thousands more were left with life-changing injuries. For the first time in centuries, Sidera itself burned and the enemy had still yet to send its army to its doorstep. What's worse, fortresses, that had been built centuries before to prevent enemy armies from crossing the mountains, were now either laid in ruins or now acted as tombs for the men now buried inside them, leaving the passes through Duma Mountains wide open for the enemy to walk through them and march to Sidera. All this has plunged the entire noble population of Sidera into a state of panic, as many of them were hurried to flee the capital, which appeared to be no longer safe from the wrath of other worlders. By the time the sun began to blanket continent with its golden rays, a long line of carriages began to form within the upper levels of Sidera itself. On them were packed the worldly possessions of the many noble houses that once called the capital home, as well as members of said houses as well. They were all leaving the capital itself and were going to the new cities as far away from Sidera itself. The ANF aerial night attack had placed the fear of the gods within them, and many had deemed Sidera unsafe for their families. As a result, many members of the Senate and noble houses had decided to send their families far away to prevent them from being hurt or even worse. Some would go to the many of new cities near the very edge of the empire itself, while others, mostly from the peace factions, would go to some of the few former vassal states, now independent kingdoms, whose royal houses still maintain good relations with the imperial nobles despite recent events. One of such states was none other than Italica, and despite being occupied by the other worlders, many of the peace faction noble houses would gladly go there, because they knew that the other worlders would never hurt the innocent civilians. Anywhere for them was far better than staying in the capital. And naturally, many of the nobles were now cursing the emperor for not making peace with the other worlders, while others, mostly the war faction, were blaming the emperor for not taking decisive actions and destroy the barbarians, and retake the Alnus Hill. This was a fact that was not lost by Princess Pina as well, as several of her knights decided to leave with their families. The princess respected their decision. Like everyone else in Sidera, Pina saw the wrath of the other worlds and saw firsthand the destruction they had caused, when she and her knights went into the city to assist where they could. Pina had witnessed just what the other worlders were capable of, when they saved Italica almost a month ago, but it was still unnerving compared to see such destruction in her own home. She knew that it would be extremely difficult to convince her people that if the empire would have to survive, it would have to swallow its pride and accept defeat gracefully. But now it was quite clear that the other worlders have become impatient and wanted the empire to come to the peace table either today or never, or at least that's what ambassadors Sugawara and Russell had told her. When they warned her about the attack, the other worlders were no longer going to wait for the empire's decision. They were going to make the emperor come to the peace table whether he wanted to or not, by using all means necessary. However, Pina didn't show any regret to what the other worlders did. Those nobles mocked her last day, calling her, "foolish little girl," when she tried to warn them about the upcoming destruction, and now, they were all running scared, like rats from the sinking ship. She believed that it served them right for not listening to her. Now they're paying for their hubris and boastfulness. She didn't regret her knights leaving with their families. They've been reassigned to the Lady Panasha's Grey Rose Company in Italica, where they shall strengthen the garrison and increase the security of the province. Also, she learned that Japanese Vice Minister Shirayuri and Russian Ambassador Zakharov will finally arrive at Sidera for the upcoming ceremony of the unconditional surrender, accompanied by General Cilia Stingray Abernathy with her Knight Sabers, and a contingent of G.I. Joes as ambassador's escort. Cilia was been temporarily removed from her position as Italica garrison's commander and was been placed as the head of the security of Allied Nations Embassy in Sidera. All this was pointing that the ANF foresees the possible upcoming events and taken precautions in order to make sure that their people are not harmed, as it happened to the Chinese ambassador during Empire's invasion at Ginza. Pina fully understood the ANF's actions. They've warned her father, but he did not listen, so they're now reminding him the hard way that the fate of the empire is lying on his shoulders. If he truly loves his empire, he must finally make up his mind and do anything in order to finally stop this war. She was only hoping that the emperor would finally listen to reason and put a stop to this useless war. Yet she's still worried about Zorzel. Centurion and Diabo had warned her that her brother might try to rise up against their father. Pina was hoping that Zorzel wouldn't do something this stupid, yet in her deep thoughts she knew that her brother is too arrogant to let something like the throne of the empire slip through his fingers. She was only hoping that her father is also be able to avoid Zorzel's treachery and make peace with the other worlders, as well removing him from successorship and placing somewhere where he can't cause any more trouble for the empire. But Pina knew that you can't wish for everything. Some hopes are made to be broken. She was only hoping that not all her hopes will break after this day, which will decide the empire's fate forever. Little did she knew is that at this moment, there was an event going on in other place of Falmart, that will decide not just Empire's fate but fate of the entire Falmart continent as well. By morning, the two tomahawks have reached the city of Belnargo, where the Temple of Hardy was been located. "Wow," said Atami, looking at the CTIY from above, "it's even far ancient than Rondel." I'll say, said Eric, look at all those smoking amulets of Hardy. It's like the whole city is having a smoking party. Those smokes said to be driving away evil spirits, who might harm the mortal souls, said Tuka. Really? Surprised Eric, and I thought smoking was only good to relax your mind. It also kills your brain, Yankee, snorted Atami. Fuck you, stupid nip, shot back Eric. Hey, yelled Atami. Alright, you jokers, suddenly boomed Tomahawk's pilot lift ticket's voice through the PA, pipe down back there. I'm trying to land this bird without crashing it, and it's hard with all those birds in the air. So unless you wanna walk home by your feet, I suggest you shut up and let me handle my job. Yes, sir, answered both Marine and JSDF officers. Rory then giggled, hearing how the pilot of the flying machine is making both men behave. By the way, Lele, said lift ticket next to Lele, who seated at the other seat, you're handling the controls quite well. Thanks, smiled Lele, I think, with a few more timing, I can finally harness the power of flying. Hey, I think, you can easily fly with your own scepter, said lift ticket. It takes too much of concentration and power, answered Lele, I prefer to fly this Tom A. Hawk, it's much easier. Well, said lift ticket, I think, in few days, you can easily fly this baby all by yourself, kid. Thank you, smiled Lele. Afterwards, both helicopters landed before the main temple of Hardy. Whoa, said Haruka, looking at the temple, it sure is a big one, alright. It's where most of the people come to pray for their dead relatives, said Setsuna. I hope, we're not gonna attract too much attention, said Hibbard. Correction, Bud, replied Booth, we're already dead. Look at the locals gazing on our choppers. Yup, said Michiru, they'll probably thinking, that some new gods have arrived. I only hope, that those assassins will not followed us from Rondel, said Gray. I agree, said Alexander, they're quite quick and have many of their contacts in the Empire. Never mind the assassins, answered Centurion, we've got other things to worry about. Come on, let's go to the temple. Ah, shouldn't we go into the line, like everyone, asked Arpeggio. Who needs the line, snorted Rory, we got our invitation right here. That's right, said Centurion, removing the scroll from his pocket, come on. As they approached the temple, they saw a group of white-dressed priestesses. Rory Mercury, said one of them, although you're an apostle of Emroy, you may not enter our god's temple without his permission. Like this one, said Centurion, showing the stunned priestesses the scroll. The priestesses then kneeled down before them. Forgive us our rudeness, Sir Prime, said one of them, we've been expecting you. Good, said Centurion, now, lead the way. The priestesses lead the group into the temple, where they saw many people praying before the main altar. As they passed the altar, they've entered the door, that leads into below the temple. Rory then got scared again. Don't worry, said Centurion, taking her hand, you're with me. She won't harm you, while I'm here. But you're no god, said Rory. Maybe, answered Centurion, but I've met other gods, so I'm no stranger of meeting this world's gods. Come on, they're waiting for us. It was soon, they've walked into the big hall underground with huge columns. At the end of it, stood the main altar of Hardy. There were also others, aside the head priests, who commend, the apostles of other gods. Rory, beamed Faye, apostle of Merida, hugging Rory, it's good to see you again, little sister. Alright, groaned Rory, take it easy, Faye. You're ruined a good dress. So, you're the man, whose Rory formed contract with, said Mabel to Centurion, I was actually expecting her choice as some berserker warrior, than a normal man from other world. Looks are always deceiving, my dear, answered Centurion, Hokuto Shinken only turns me into the fist of God of Death, but I'm still a human. That's why the heavens choose me as the new successor of that art. By the way, are you Mabel Forn, apostle of Zumfoot? I am, replied Mabel, although I prefer to protect law and order, as well guard the peace. Well, as if may sound strange to you, my dear, smiled Centurion, so do I. What? Surprised Mabel, but you're a warrior. How can you hate the main thing, which made you, who you are? Because I've seen, what horrors the war does, answered Centurion, and that's why I hate it. But I can't stop fighting because of those who died for our cause and for their people, and because it's the only way I can stop the war by bringing peace." "I see," said Mabel. "By the way, I've heard it, that several of your troopers are called peacekeepers, right?" "That's right," answered Centurion. "They work as the peacekeeping force from the United Nations. Their job is to maintain peace in special region and enforce law and order in formal principality." "Sounds like mine kind of troops," smiled Mabel. "I would like to meet those UN troopers." "Actually," said Centurion, "I think they'll gladly accept you as their mascot, Mabel." "Really?" surprised Mabel. "I think'll like that." "It's good to see you once more, Rory," said the dwarf Mortar Mobkiss, the apostle of Duncan, god of blacksmithery. "I see that your halberd is still sharp after all those years." "Thank you, Mortar," smiled Rory, "although I must admit that I've been thinking about giving it an upgrade." "Upgrade?" surprised Mortar. "What do you mean, Rory?" "Well, I thought that if you could combine my halberd with the other worlders' weapons," answered Rory, "it'll be much more suited for me in the new battles." "Really?" said Mortar. "That sounds intriguing. I better take a look on how these other worlders' weapons are working." "It's good to see you, Sir Prime," said Granham, shaking Centurion's hand. "I am Granham, the apostle of Flare, god of the sun and the light." "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Granham," answered Centurion, slightly bowing his head. "I've been hearing many things about you." "Well then," smiled Granham, "I'm sure that my lord will be very pleased to meet you, Sir Prime." "Visitors, may I have your attention?" suddenly said one of the head priests. "You have all been summoned by our gods to participate in the important event. The gods will now descend in this place, show them respect." As the apostles and the natives of Falmart kneeled before the appeared light, Centurion, the knights and other soldiers saluted, thus greeting the upcoming gods. Then, from the pillar of light, came 12 beings, each of them looked different. "Welcome, visitors from other world," said one of them. "We are welcome you in our world. We have summoned you here, so that you will help us to save the Falmart." "Save the Falmart?" asked Haruka. "What does he mean?" "May I ask, who are you?" asked Centurion. "We are the gods of Falmart," answered the being. "We are the first, who came into this world by the gate, who brought all living things here, and later become the gods of it. I am Flare, the god of the sun and light. I am Emroy, the god of war, darkness, death, madness, crime and punishment," said another. "I am Zumfut, god of peace, order and the light," said the third. "I am Werharan, goddess of nature and living things," said the female being. "I am Mirida, goddess of fertility and birth," said the second female being. "I am Elange, the god of knowledge," said one of the twins. "I am Rawl, the goddess of learning," said the second twin. "I am Duncan, god of blacksmithery. I am Lunalier, god of the music and culture. I am Deldort, god of covenants. I am Polypon, god of revenge. We welcome you, other worlders," they said all together. "Thank you, gentlemen," answered Centurion. "On behalf of the allied nations I must say, that it is my honor to finally meet you face to face." "No, Sir Prime," said Emroy, "the honor is all ours. Please, take a seat. It's time for us to begin." Suddenly, 11 thrones of elegant design appeared at the temple before the U-shaped platform, that hugged 3 of the 4 walls that enclosed the chamber itself, while a single podium stood in the center and much lower than the thrones themselves, meaning whoever stood there would have to look up at the 11 individuals who were to judge either him or her. It had been centuries since the place had been last used for its purpose, but now it was being used once again to judge one of their own. Aside from the podium, there were several benches on each sides. Centurion, the knights, shadow warriors, ghosts, Lele, Arpeggio, Tuca, Yao, Atami, Mimosa and Eric seated on the left side, while Rory and other apostles on the right side, while the gods seated at each thrones, with Flare in the middle of it, as the chairman of the council. "Let the god tribunal commence," said Flare. "May the defendant enters." Then, the pillar of the light appeared once more, and from it, stood a woman who appeared to be in her late 20s, early 30s. She had long, silver hair that flowed down her back and was dressed in black dress with red and silver trim and would be considered quite attractive to any mortal who saw her, but did not truly know who she was. But her most noticeable feature were her piercing silver blue eyes that instilled unimaginable fear to anyone unfortunate enough to meet her face to face. Then again, no one would expect anything less when she was the goddess of the underworld itself. But instead of exuding power and confidence, her eyes right now showed something not normally found in being like herself: fear. As she walked into the underground chamber of judgment, the goddess could see her former comrades sitting on their thrones. She could feel their eyes burning through her body, their faces showing just how disappointed they were in their former companion. She had broken the unspoken rules that had governed them all for countless centuries, resulting in irreversible damage to their realm. Now she was here to answer for her misguided deeds. Her ultimate fate was now rested in the hands of those she once saw as her equals. A sobering feeling, to say the very least. "We all know why we have gathered here, so I don't think I have to remind anyone," said Flair, as he addressed those assembled in the chamber at that moment. "I have to say, Hardy, we are quite disappointed in you. Your callous actions have not only needlessly endangered our realm, but could have resulted in the destruction of the entire multiverse as well." "I agree," replied Emroy, as he glared at the goddess from his throne. "Of all the idiotic things you have done in the past, this is by far the most reckless thing you have ever done." "Funny. I thought you of all people would appreciate what I have done," Hardy replied with a small smirk of her own, but inwardly she was quite nervous about her situation. "But then I would not do something this stupid," snapped Emroy, slamming his fist on the table. "Do you have any idea just how many lives have been needlessly lost because of your little stunt with the gate? Do you even know just how many more could have been lost just by attempting to destroy the gate so recklessly?" replied Rawl. Her voice was not as harsh as the others, but it was very clear that she too was upset her former comrade actions. "Because of your actions, the balance of this world and the other world have been thrown off greatly," Zufmud added on, slamming his own fist on the table. "What even possessed you to stop my apostle to fulfill her mission? Do you know that our entire existence were dependent on her success? How dare you allow those Saturans march into the gate and start this war? Who gave you permission to overabuse your duties? Those blasted Saturans and their government needed to be taught a lesson in humility," Hardy shot back, now angered by how she was now being treated. "Those fools were getting too arrogant for their own good and needed to be taught a lesson. They needed to know that there were powers much greater than them, that they were nothing more than ants when compared to the grand scheme of things. There may be arrogant, but it was not your place to do what you did," Flair reminded her. "We already tried to teach the mortals humility by our own means. Your duty is to punish those who have done wrong in life and showed no remorse for what they done. But now you've endangered our entire world by recklessly starting this war, as well trying to destroy the gate, which was our only way to save everything we hold so dear in this world. I don't remember you getting so angry when one of your girlfriend's students used that mirror to open a portal to another universe a few years ago. Don't you dare bring Celestia into this," roared Flair, slamming his palm on the table and slowly starting to lose his patience with the arrogant woman before him. "How dare she insult his beloved adopted sister? There is also the issue with your apostle waking the Deirdrico from its hibernation 50 years before it was supposed to," Werharan suddenly spoke up. "Need I remind you that the reason I created the beast was to periodically cull the wildlife of Falmart so as to not cause an overpopulation problem? There were not enough animals when Giselle woke the beast, and as a result, hundreds of animals and elves were killed, and it destroyed thousands acres of woodland. It would have taken centuries for those forests to recover naturally, if we have them. And don't get me even started with your stunt bringing a saltwater aquadrico into a freshwater river and attempting to create a dragon army. Who's authorized your actions?" "I am not responsible for Giselle's unfortunate actions," replied Hardy. "Objection," suddenly cried Centurion. "What do you want to say, Sir Prime?" asked Werharan. "I must stated to the tribunal that all Giselle's actions were been authorized by Lord Hardy," said Centurion. "During our rescue of the Dark Elves, Giselle stated that she deliberately mated the Deirdrico and Aquadrico, so they could bred the army of dragons, by the orders of Lord Hardy." "That's a lie," screamed Hardy. "Silence," roared Flair, slamming his palm on the table again. "Let the witness speak." "Go on, Sir Prime." "I may also need to inform the tribunal," said Centurion, "that the Dark Elves were been deliberately abandoned by their supposed patroness. Because of that, they've decided to worship Rory Mercury." "That's right," said Yao. "We, the elves of the Dushi clan, have decided to no longer worship the goddess of treachery, the goddess of the deception, the goddess of charlatans. I am Yao Ro Dushi, and I'll gladly worship her holiness as our new patroness. But she's not a goddess yet, surprised Emroy. How can you worship someone who's still an apostle? Because it was Rory Mercury, who has saved our tribe, answered Yao. Without her, we would have been extinct and gone, all because of Hardy's betrayal. Therefore, we'll gladly serve Rory Mercury as our patroness. I see, said Flair. Hardy, do you have any objections in what the witnesses have spoken? No, muttered Hardy, but I did punish Giselle, and she is no longer associated with my temple or followers. But not before the Aquadrico destroyed many of our temples in the kingdom of Elb, replied Deldort, again slamming his fist in anger. Need I remind you, that because of your actions or lack of them, many of our worshippers have begun to question their faith in us. I don't see what the problem is, she shot back arrogantly. Because of me, those mortals have witnessed her true power, when I opened the gate on Alnus Hill. And as a result, they have all begun to question if we are truly worthy of their worship. Hardy, Flair responded, a man without a god is still a man, but a god without a man is nothing. Not only did you cause this apocryph and started this war, but you did it for your own twisted amusement. You have put all of us at risk, little sister, Emroy berated the goddess of the underworld. I was willing to look the other way whenever chased after my apostle, but this time you've gone too far. We have been in contact with the Guardian of Time, and he said, that our realm is still doomed, and there's nothing we can do to stop it, said Elange. We are now been forced to migrate into this other realm, and it's all your fault. In light of your actions, I am afraid that you have proven yourself to be incompetent and reckless as your duty as the Lord of the Underworld, which leave us with no other choice, said Flair, as he and the rest of the tribunal stood up from their seats. A new sense of dread soon began to fill Hardy, as she knew just what was to come next. Lord Hardy, it is the decision of this tribunal that you'll be cast out from the Hall of the Gods and stripped of your title as Goddess of the Underworld, the God of the Sun declared, his gaze never leaving the now fallen goddess before him. Your actions have doomed our realm and forever damaged the mortals' faith in us. For this, you must pay severely. No, Hardy squealed in fear, as she knew very well what happened when a god was cast out. Please. Don't do this. A glowing circle suddenly appeared around the now frightened goddess, as she could feel as if her very life force was being pulled out, but the truth was far more terrible than she would have liked to admit. A ear-piercing scream escaped her black lips, as the light got brighter and the pain even more intense, but as quickly as it began, the circle faded away to reveal the unconscious form of a now mortal Hardy. Centurion and Michiru run to her and checked her conditions. She's all right, said Michiru, checking her heartbeat, she's only unconscious. Don't worry, said Flair, we didn't plan to kill her. So, what now? Asked Emroy worryingly, as looked on in pity at his younger sibling. Emroy may have been known as the bloodthirsty god of insanity and darkness, but that did not mean he was still worried about his little sister. Where shall we place her? It's not your fault, old friend. Flair reassured him, you could have never known that she would have stooped so low. However, I cannot leave her here, you understand why, and we cannot send her to that world she's opened the gate to. How ironic that she has to be protected from her own devices. So if not to Falmart or Earth, then where? May I suggest something? A new voice chimed in. From the Pillar of Light, appeared another entity the tribunal had long grown to both respect and fear, as he was of the many trans-dimensional beings that had noticed Hardy's reckless actions and had contacted them about their consequences. He was, to them anyway, dressed in rather odd attire, similar to that worn by some of the other worlders but much older. He may have looked like a mortal, but the gods knew better. Well, I'll be, said Eric, who would have guessed, that the version of Morgan Freeman will appeared. He's more than just a man, Eric-san, answered Setsuna. Really? Surprised Atami, who is he then? Shish, whispered Tuka, let him speak. I have to say, you are all lucky I was able to stabilize your universe, as well as the other one, said the newcomer, though I doubt you still don't like the idea of being forced to permanently to relocate into that other realm. Then again, I would not be talking with you now, if I hadn't fixed that little problem. What do you suggest, Carl? Emroy asked the Guardian. Carl, surprised Eric, his name is Carl. Yeah, said Atami, I was expecting much bigger name. Karl just shrugged, before he replied. It's not my place to act as an executioner for anyone, nor is it to pass judgment on others. Hardy deserves to be punished for what she did, now that she is no longer one of your own. But she is mortal now and obviously can't stay here in your hall. She can't go to Falmart and there is no way we can send her to the world she connected your world with. Maybe I can get my sisters to help, Flair suggested, but Karl shook his head before he replied. Sorry, but I doubt they could help her. Even with her pupil becoming the Princess of Friendship, strange title by the way, Hardy is just too dangerous. Princess of Friendship, not exactly a title one would normally take. Then what do you suggest? Asked Emroy curiously. Hardy cannot stay here, but I know where she would both be safe and would never cause trouble for anyone ever again, explained Karl. But once I take her away, you will never see her again. She will be unable to return, and you would not be able to retrieve her. But she will be safe and even have a chance to live out her mortal life. But it's all up to you, of course. A thunderous silence filled the chamber, as the gods mulled over what the being before them suggested. Hardy had crossed the line and had done irreversible damage to both realms. It was only by sheer luck that their universes did not tear themselves apart. Worst still, despite her claims they all knew that Hardy only did what she did to amuse herself. She had interfered with forces she had no right to interfere with and had almost destroyed everything. Worst still, even though she may no longer be a god, Hardy still had the charisma to manipulate others to do her bidding. As much as they did not want to admit it, Hardy was just too dangerous to keep around. Do what you have to do then, Karl, Flair replied, as he and his group allowed Karl to deal with the fallen goddess in her own way. Thank you, gentlemen, answered Karl, then he walked to Centurion and Michiru. Centurion lifted Hardy off the floor and gave her to Karl. Here you go, he said, I'll hope you'll do real good with her. Don't worry about it, Commander, answered Karl, I'll take care of her. By the way, it's good to see you again, Setsuna. Why, thank you, Karl, smiled Setsuna. Wait, what? Gasped Eric, you're saying that you know this Morgan Freeman guy, Lieutenant Colonel. Let's just say, there are things that much higher than ANF, answered Setsuna. After that, Karl then turned and walked into the Pillar of Light, disappearing with Hardy forever. Well then, said Flair, now with that problem taken care of, there's still matter of someone's taking Hardy's job. Emroy then sighed. Guess I don't have much of a choice. After all, I am the god of death. Guess then I'll take Hardy's realm as well. Agree, said Flair, however, your apostle may also have an assistant, because she's already have her own duties. Very well, said Emroy. Rory, once you've returned to Alnus, you may have Giselle as your assistant. From now on, this temple is also your god's temple as well. Hearing this, other priests and priestesses kneeled before Rory, who in turn bowed before Emroy. May your wish be done as always, my lord, she spoke. Good, said Flair, now then, Sir Prime, it's time for you to learn everything, why we did allowed to open the gate. Yes, said Centurion, please, speak. I'm all ears. Taylor awoke in the guest suite after a fitful night's sleep, although he had to admit the dreams were a little vivid. As he might have guessed, Aurelia and Naiu were already up. Lady Agrippina requests your presence at morning meal, my lord, Aurelia told him, an ever respectful but satisfied look on her face, his uniform already laid out. While it was true that Saturn first meal was much more in line with a continental breakfast than the meal that Americans tended to think of, it would be the last opportunity to sit down and speak before Taylor and those continuing with him set out for the estate of Lady Vestas, one of the lesser-ranked noble ladies who had chosen to remain at Camp Augustus, at least until she knew what was left of her home. Well then, far be it from me to refuse a lady or risk her displeasure. I'd better not dally, Taylor replied and reached for his shirt. Quickly making himself presentable, Taylor headed down to the dining hall with Aurelia, Naiu, and knights in tow. This is going to be a thing from now on, he thought to himself. To punish me for my contempt for authority, the gods have made me an authority. Taking the seat offered at Agrippina's table, he recognized Decanus Gallus seated looking almost overwhelmed but doing his best to maintain a proper and respectful appearance, but it was clear the young man was looking at Agrippina with a certain sense of awe. He looks like a smart kid. She'll take good care of him. Lord Octavius, Agrippina greeted, your Lieutenant Ramsay should be with us shortly. Yes, I understand he's anxious to have his men take a look at the pipes in your water system. Yes. She turned to the decanus. These people have learned about a few things which can be dangerous to us. Please inform Senior Centurion Julianus I would wish for him to have his engineers on hand to help in this survey. After the hasty departure of the unlamented legate of the 8th Legion and his compatriots and retainers, Centurion Julianus had assumed command of the remains of 8th Legion. Agrippina planned to speak to Julianus later at a more discreet moment. Lady Octavia had taught her the need to maintain the dignity of those she did not claim as her enemy, so she would carefully inquire as to the centurion's plans and encourage him to view the off-worlders as a beneficial presence rather than a threat. Certainly, having the 8th Legion reconstituted locally would give incentive for these troops to patrol and protect the area. Especially with the word that centaur raids had been increasing in certain areas. Yes, my lady, the young officer replied immediately, eager to merit her approval. Very good, she nodded favorably. She looked up as she saw Lieutenant Ramsay enter the hall. I hope you slept well, Lieutenant. Ah, yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good. You and your men are invited guests. It is only proper that your stay is as comfortable as possible. She then turned to Taylor. My lord. I know that Lady Octavia bade you to inspect the holdings of several other noble families. Many of them are in this region. She looked at Ramsay. If the lieutenant would consent to the use of his men, many of those estates are in close by. With a couple of exceptions, we could tend these other estates, allowing you to press on to the holdings of House Germanicus and your own somewhat more extensive holdings. Taylor considered her offer. Lieutenant. Ramsay paused. His instructions were to establish a radio transmitter and survey Lady Agrippina's holdings and help set up a defensive base in the area. While other estates were not strictly part of Agrippina's agreement, he supposed the information gained in a closer survey of these other locations could be of use. It sounds like a reasonable proposal. I'll clear it with higher-ups. Thank you, Lieutenant. I must admit I'm eager to see what home looks like. Aurelia smiled. Mother will be pleased to meet you also, my lord. And her daughter. Well, I guess that settles it. Very good, my lord, Agrippina agreed and lifted her glass. My lord, noble ladies, and gentlemen. Now let us dine in the custom of your homeland, gentlemen. A fair journey to you, my lord, and good fortune to us all. For the first time since the Great Earthshake, the Imperial Senate would finally meet within the walls of the Senate building. The Sheikh had caused the Senate to take a break from OTS duties, so as to allow the senators' noble house leaders to tend to their own and take stock of their losses. If this were another time, the subject of today's meeting would be focused on whatever efforts could be made to assist in relief efforts within the Empire. But these were not normal times. Just hours before the Senate was to meet, the other worlders made their first real move against Sidera and had the Imperial Court on edge. In less than 2 hours, a number of Imperial garrisons loaded in and around Sidera itself had been destroyed by smoke and flame, yet no other worlder army could be seen anywhere in or around the city itself. For the first time in centuries, Sidera burned and the smoke could still be seen rising above the city hours after the attack. Hundreds of Imperial soldiers were dead and thousands more were wounded. While the armies of the Western nobility were now making preparations to withdraw from Sidera and march back to their homes. All for whom were now being led by Duke Leo El Atreides. It's as if the gods have writhed on the wall the same words, as it was been in Earth's Bible, mean, tekel, fairs, numbered, weighed, divided, and they've all been true. The Empire had enraged an enemy like no other they had faced in the past, an enemy that possessed great powers and great skill. An enemy that always seemed to be more than 100 steps ahead of them in every way imaginable, yet did not fight in the traditional way. They had managed to isolate the Empire from its would-be allies, and it was even known they had even killed Flame Dragon with ease. A rumor many now believed to be true, seeing they had personally delivered a dead water dragon to Sidera before the attack. If these other worlders were able to kill both a flame dragon and a Aquadrico and attack the capital itself, then what hope did the Empire have in defeating them? This war cannot continue, proclaimed Marquis Castle, as he addressed the assembly. We are dealing with an enemy that has no equal on the continent and surpasses the Empire in every way we can imagine. We must end this war now, or risk our own destruction. 'Tis Toure, Spoke up Cicero Lamoltes, remembering what he had seen when the other worlders showed off their weaponry to both him and his colleagues. We have no hopes of defeating this enemy. They possess weapons that make our sharpest swords useless and our best archers look helpless. If we continue this war, then it will spell the end of our empire and its people. They are so powerful, yet they have not made any attempts to attack us head-on. Potawan, always so arrogant and dim-witted, shot back. They don't attack us because they fear our true might. They attack us like the cowards they are in the night, rather than face us in a real fight. The Empire has never lost a war and we will not bow down to these barbarians because of their tricks. You call a dead Aquadrico at our doorstep a mere trick? Replied Castle, shocked by his Colosia's senseless statement. Have you forgotten the losses we took when our men crossed the gate? The losses we took, when the other worlders followed us back through the gate and captured Alnus Hill? Or has your own delusions of invincibility have blinded you from the smoke above our city? Are you forgetting, that as of right now, we do not only not control the Alnus province, we do not have been able to mount any kind of offensive to take it back. Not only we aren't able to attack, said Marquis Taiuli, it will take us years to rebuild our ranks to what they were, before the other worlders came. To attack them now would be a fool's run, no, even worse, it'll be a suicide. Do I need to remind you, why they are even here? They've savagely beaten Crown Prince Zorzel to near death and destroyed his home, all because he held people from their world as slaves. 'Tis true, Marquis Ducci added on. Dozens of slave camps have been destroyed as a result of the other worlders searching for their people. And need I remind you of what happened to Count Calmon Mesto in Altum Herbs? They've killed him without even anyone see it, how they did it, literally blowing his upper body apart. Now they can do the same with any one of us, who's hold their people as slaves. The other worlders are more than capable of attack us whenever they want. No one is safe from their wrath. Not even our crown prince. The chamber soon erupted as senators began to argue either for or against continuing the war. But the anti-war faction seemingly drowned out those who still believed that victory was still possible. A complete 180 from almost a month before, as the Senate had wholeheartedly agreed to fight the barbarians from beyond the gate. It was a fact that was not lost on Emperor Molt, as he himself had managed to gain the Senate's support in continuing the war just a month before, but right now, it might as well have been a lifetime ago. A lot had changed since the other worlders came through the gate. The vassal kingdoms had broken away from the Empire, Italica had declared its independence and was now occupied by other worlder forces. Dozens of high-ranking members of the imperial court had either been killed or had gone missing, and just this morning Molt had received word that several major forts at Duma Mountains had been destroyed the night before. Thousands of imperial troops, gone within a few hours. And that's not including those, who's already been gone before that, not to mention, Baron Ha Arkonen himself, who perished in his camp by other worlders' wrath. Despite the neutral expression on his face, internally Molt was in crisis. The Empire would not win this war, nor could they. It was a harsh reality the Emperor had accepted even before the first bombs dropped over the capital. His desire to expand the Empire and cement his name in history had led him to order an army through the gate all those days ago, but never once did it ever occur to Molt that the gate could have led his people to a world that possessed unimaginable power. A world that would not take kindly to the Empire's army trying to take its territory and its people for itself. A world that saw them as the barbarians and not the bringers of civilization, he had so long believed, but rather as barbarians themselves. This fact alone has not only angered the other world's leaders, it also disgusted his own daughter, who's become the main pusher for peace, and he couldn't blame her. Who would have expected that his own troopers would act in that world as some crazed maniacs? Exclamation mark. No wonder Pina was so vocal about such brutality and berated Molt for lying to her about the Expedition Ari force. Molt knew that if they wanted to, the allied nations' forces could easily level Sidera to the ground and take its people as compensation for what the Empire had done to them and their people. And yet, they waited as long as they could before finally attacking the Empire, but it was not that the other worlders were afraid. No, they were being kind. They were showing mercy to an enemy that could crush them like a bug whenever they wanted to. It was a sobering realization, to say it mildly, knowing that the enemy he thought of barbarians was willing to show him and his people more empathy than he was willing to show them. But now, it was cleared, that the other worlders have grown impatient with the Empire dragging its feet and unwilling to open talks to end the war. In hindsight, that was a terrible idea right from the begin with. Now, there he was, seeing his own Senate, that was quite possibly just moments away from several factions starting to fighting against each other, which could also lead to a civil war, and all because he wanted to be remembered by history. In a way Molt had gotten his wish, except not in the way he had hoped. Thanks to him, the Empire was on the verge of disaster, and despite what he wanted to believe, Molt knew that there was only one way to prevent its total collapse. He just hoped that it was not too late. Getting up from his throne, the Emperor walked into the center of the assembly. An action that did not go unnoticed by both sides. My fellow members of the Imperial Court, Molt began to address the Senate. I have heard all of your concerns in regards to our situation. But though I agree that Sidera is the greatest civilization to ever grace the continent, I am afraid that may no longer be the case. After pondering the general trends of our world, I am afraid that we have no other choice, but to accept the unthinkable and yield to the other worlders' demands, or risk out immediate destruction as a people. But in defeat, our primary focus should now be on the welfare of those who had been impacted by this war. Focus now should be on the wounded and the war sufferers and those that lost everything because of this hopeless conflict. I will admit that the hardships our nation will be subjected to in the future will certainly be great, but it is a reality we must bear as a people. My decision does not come without a heavy heart, but I have accepted that I am the reason for this war and why many families are left without their fathers, sons and brothers. I blame myself for sending our men across the gate and brining the other worlders to our realm. Only I am to blame for all that had happened, and nothing will ever change that. Though, I must ask that whatever happens in the future, that you focus on protecting those who matter the most, the people of the Empire. A thunderous silence fell upon the Imperial Senate as Molt's words slowly began to sink in. A kaleidoscope of emotions soon overcame the Imperial Senate, as many could not believe that Emperor Molt Saul Augustus was not only admitting defeat, but telling them that they must accept it. He's admitting defeat. He wants us to surrender. This can't be happening. This cannot be true. No, never. You want us to bow down to those barbarians. The silence was soon broken when several members of the pro-war faction began to voice their disapproval of their emperor's intention to surrender to the other worlders. But Molt raised his hand and silenced these men, before he said, I understand your justified anger at my decision, but I am afraid that continuing this conflict would only result in more death and destruction. If we continue this course, then we will only prolong the inevitable. I was a fool to believe that the gods were on our side when the other worlders came to our world. Now it was clear that the gods were never on our side to begin with. They've punished us severely for our blasphemy. One of their apostles have joined with the leader of other worlders, the man with the fist of the North Star, and now they're threatening to destroy the Empire, just as apostles have predicted to us. Fighting against both other worlders and the gods will be a way of an idiot, and anybody who would be stupid enough to risk it will be known as the fool who destroyed the Empire because he was too stupid to face the gods' wrath. Therefore, our only way to save the Empire is to submit to the will of the gods and do what we must do in order to save our home. Yout can't be seriously considering surrender to these barbarians, Baron Clayton asked his emperor. We have more than enough men to crush them. If we just take call in our reserves on the frontier, then they will end up like the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen and his army. Mout roared back, silencing Baron Clayton, are you so blinded for your need of war, that you cannot see or not even have hope to win? Exclamation mark. While we sit here and continue to argue, outside Sidera burns for the first time in centuries. Thousands are either dead or wounded, people are running scared and we can't do anything to stop it. The fact that you are still willing to send our young men to die just to satisfy your hunger for glory disgusts me, Baron, and let me think that you are not worthy to hold the rank you have. Baron then just bit his lips and silently retook his seat, as the chamber once again fell silent, as Molt continued. Last night, we all witnessed the fury of the other worlders, and it is only going to get worse the longer we refuse to talk to them. They've been given us time before the next sunrise, then they'll unleash their full fury on us. Who is to say that the next time the other worlders attack, they would not be coming after us directly? As much as no one wanted to admit it, the ANF's attack on Sidera had shown just how helpless the Empire was against this new enemy. What took barbarian hordes and beastmen months to do during the Age of Uprisings, the other worlders had done in one night. Molt then waved his hand. "I've had enough," he said. "I'm tired of this war. Tired of constant losses. Tired of failures. Last thing we need is to see our own infrastructure collapse and our people rise up against each other. We must face the facts, senators, we're finished. Pride be damned. Pride is not a substitute for stupidity. If one of you, who still have pride in their heart and do not accept surrender, you can do as you please, but know that by the end of the war you'll be remembered as the fools, who didn't accept the reality." True, there were still those who believed that the Empire should continue to fight, but when it was put to a motion, 75% of the Imperial Senate have supported the Emperor's decision to seek peace with the other worlders. It was a very hard pill to swallow to say the very least, but everyone has saw that it was the only way to prevent the utter destruction of the Empire. But while the discussion to devolved speculation as to what would come next, there was one individual who now are boiling in anger at his father's decision. Despite his savage injuries, Prince Zorzel was present for the debate and he was absolutely disgusted by what he had seen. "Traitors, they were all traitors," he mentally snarled, gnawing his teeth. "How dare they cons defeat to those basted barbarians? They're selling out the Empire just to save their own hides, rather than fight on to preserve the honor of the Empire. Cowards, all of them. But what made it all the more worse, is that my own father, the Emperor of the Sateran Empire, was the one to instigate this blasted call for peace. Why couldn't this father have died before the gate had opened? Exclamation mark. If I was Emperor, those other worlders would be begging for mercy, as my armies burned their cities to the ground. No, this could not be allowed to happen, not as long as his father was still alive. And there's also Pina. Both of them had sold out the Empire to these uncivilized barbarians. This will not happen. Not as long as I have something to say about it. The time has come for the sons of Sidera to act. Now is time to act to save the Empire and to finally crush those barbarians once and for all. Soon, history would remember me as Emperor Zorzel I, savior of the Sateran Empire." Despite what many believed about the royal, Zorzel was quite devious and calculating when he wanted to be. His own circles were already gathered and ready. All he needed to do right now was wait for the right moment to strike. With that, he left the Senate building, but not before sending Cassiopeia on the secret mission to Herm Fulmeo's home. Panache completed her daily inspection of the city's defenses with satisfaction, especially as she watched a small caravan of trade wagons pass safely through the West Gate. From a city at risk amid a storm of chaos, Italica was once more becoming a haven and a thriving hub for local trade. It was a prosperity sorely absent in the rest of the Empire at present. She turned to her aide. "We've accomplished so much." "Indeed, my lady," Ainair agreed with a light smile. "If you are going to insist on calling me lady, then I should address thee as such as well. For surely we are equals." "You perhaps even a little beyond me," Panache replied. "By what I understand of elven culture, Arlov declared you his wife by bringing you into his home." Ainair chuckled slightly. "That tradition was old even in my grandmother's time. I had not actually planned on holding him to it." "Oh?" Panache inquired mildly. "And now?" "Originally, I only sought a safe and loving home for my son. And then I saw how they accepted each other as if they had always been father and son. If only for a few decades, my son will have a true father who loves him without question and who he can hold in his heart for all of his days. When I saw that, I realized I still wanted to be a wife as well as a mother. If only for the span of a human lifetime, it will be far better than without." "There are still other high elves," Panache pointed out. "True. And one day, I may meet one who can be a true partner. But why wait for one day, when I have what I want already here?" "That's true," Panache conceded. "Not to say that I would not like a proper elven wedding this time." This time, Fane thought it was silly. "I didn't want to push him away by pressing the matter. And you? What kind of proper noble wife would I be without a properly impressive wedding? Once the peace is signed at least. In your culture, is the wedding not the responsibility of the bride's father? At least to supply a suitable dowry. And how did the noble Baron Kalji take the news of your intentions to marry an off-worlder?" Being a knight requires one to learn proper tactics. In this case, securing my mother's approval and aid before broaching the idea with my father. He'll come around in time, but I need to outflank him first. A wise strategy, Ainair noted as they turned from the wall and strolled to their meeting with the Uil counselors. And what do you know of the traditions of warrior bunnies? From what I've heard, a bunny warrior simply takes her intended mate to the village center and declares him to be hers. Of course, that could merely be popular myth and rumor. Aurelia, on the other hand, was brought up in the Empire and its traditions. I know that her father, Germanicus, already approves of a bonding between them, and I'm certain that her mother will be quite pleased when they meet. The traditions of Niu's people, on the other hand. Ainair giggled. Who are we to deprive our beloved of experiencing all the cultural excitement of this world? An apocryph? Asked Centurion. Yes, said Flare, it has also been called as the mist of nothingness. It's the deadly shadow-like mist of dark matters originated from the void that sucks the life out of any being comes into contact with. It was been prophesied to consume the Flamart, said Elange, when the gods will leave the world, in which the entire Falmart will be reduced into primordial chaos. Any living things or even spirit being near the apocryph will slowly having their life force sucked away, said Werharan. Coming into contact with mist directly will cause everything to be completely frozen up and becoming absolutely fragile. Like dipping an object into liquid nitrogen, said Hibbard. Close enough, said Rawl, not even we the gods are immune to its effect. It appeared about several years ago in our realm, said Emroy, unknown to us. Flare and I did our best to stop the thing, but it was impossible. But wasn't the apocryph should appeared about 1,000 years later, asked Rory. Apparently, Hardy had lied to us, snorted Deldort, she didn't tell us about its origin, until it was too late to stop it. Even now as we speak, the apocryph is consuming our realm, said Zumfoot, taking one part after another. What's worse, is that after Hardy's eviction from her position as the goddess of the underworld, it will also consume her realm, leaving us with less time to save Falmart. Or you're saying, that the apocryph has also appeared in Falmart, asked Setsuna. Yes, said Duncan, it's already appeared in the mountain massive of Napni, where it continues to grow and grow. We cannot prevent it from leaking into Falmart. Sounds like we need to find a handy man, who might be able to fix the leak, said Atami. It's not that simple, Atami-kun, replied Michiru, even if we fix that leak in Falmart, it will continues to grow in the gods' realm, almost killing them. Yes, Lady Kaio, you're absolutely correct, said Palapon, and you shall also know, that once the god passes away, everything he guards is also begins to die. Does that mean, said Eric, that if, shall we say, Miss Werharan here disappeared, the forests also dies? Yes, Sir Hartman, answered Werharan, you're right as well. Bummer, muttered Eric. So that's why you've allowed Hardy to open the gate? Asked Centurion, so that Mabel Thorne could contact the other world leaders to ask them for accepting the Falmart natives into our world. Exactly, Sir Prime, said Flare. Unfortunately, because of Hardy's machinations, her mission was forced to be cancelled. Well, to be fair, said Centurion, knowing the Empire, we wouldn't be able to escape the war in other ways as well. They're too arrogant and always want more slaves. A kingdom that lives only on the back of slaves, war and constant victories. Such kingdom is doomed to its destruction right from the start. It's just surprising that this one's was able to survive this long, but in the end, it'll be the same. But that's the story for philosophers and historians. Meanwhile, we need to do everything in order to save the inhabitants of Falmart. What's the plan, sir? Asked Hibbard. Well, first of all, said Centurion, we need to organize much stronger expedition to Napni, in order to inspect the apocryph mist and understand the collateral damage it might causes, as well the time we might have in order to start the evacuation. I need to contact my superiors, so that they can arrange the scientists to arrive into Falmart, so that we can proceed to Napni. Once our investigation complete, we can use the results to estimate the time for the evacuation we have. An excellent idea, Sir Prime, said Granham. I will personally accompany you at Napni with Lucina. Yes, said Lucina, the white-feathered Siren, I'll gladly assist you in saving the life in Falmart, Sir Prime. Then it's decided, said Flare. Sir Prime, to you we entrust the task of saving the population of Falmart. But you must be real quick. we don't have much time. Leave that to me, Lord Flare, answered Centurion. I've been saving my world for numerous time, it became part of my daily job. And even despite the fact that I can't save Falmart, I've grown quite fonded with the inhabitants of this world, as well with its animals and plants. I can also assure you that you'll feel right at home in our world. There's plenty of places the humans, demihumans and beasts can live without causing too much trouble for each other, as well to other humans. And as for your apostles, well, we already have Rory, who's practically became the mascot of our armed forces, so I believe that many others will quite fit in our society. That sounds really great, Sir Prime, beamed Faye, hugging Centurion. I'm sure you'll help me and the priestesses of our Lord to help the women of your world. Of course, I will, smiled Centurion, embracing the quite beautiful woman, who kissed him in the cheek. Great, smiled Haruka, looks like Commander has found another girlfriend. I can't see, why not, giggled Michiru, but I know that his heart will always belongs to me. Sir Prime, warriors of allied nations forces, said Flare, you all carry our hopes of salvation. We shall all await your report from our apostles. Until we meet again. Then, one by one, the gods has disappeared, returning to their realm. Well, said Centurion, that's that. Now, we better get back to Rondel. There's still matter of that conference and those assassins. It's time for us to get to the bottom of who wants to kill me and Eric, and if it's Zorzel, then may Flare have mercy on his miserable soul, 'cause I certainly will not. A lone horse and its rider made their way towards their destination, towards a castle in the mountains, called Black Rock. This morning, Emperor Mold had announced his decision to surrender to the other worlders and end the war. An announcement that did not go well with many within the Imperial Senate, but was still accepted by the most of population of the Empire. But not all agree with the Emperor's decision to surrender. For many, surrendering to those barbarians from beyond the gate was the ultimate insult to the Sateran civilization and its people. Just how could the Emperor so willingly admit defeat, when the Empire could easily raise a 1,000,000-man army in a matter of weeks? Exclamation mark. The Empire could crush the other worlders under their sheer weight with ease and drive them back across the gate and back into their world. Molt knew this, everyone in the Senate knew this, yet he wanted to give up and hand the Empire to Thone-blasted other worlders. This cannot be allowed to happen. The Empire will not be destroyed by a man who was clearly unfit to lead the nation in its darkest hour. Which was why Legate Dono Cal Crappa of the 129th Legion of the Imperial Army was on his way to Blackstone. His 129th was one of the more seasoned units within the Imperial Army, even though being one of the youngest. Prior to the war, the 129th had been stationed in the Northern Territories as a part of the occupation force that had been left behind after destruction of the Bunny tribes. They were also one of the few Imperial units who were under the direct authority of Prince Zorzel himself, and as a result, the Crown Prince had personally installed officers who were totally loyal to him and only him. One of which was none other than Legate Crappa, who Zorzel had installed as the overall commander of the 129th Legion. Now the legate was on his way to meet with his longtime friend, who requested his presence. Just like many within their circle, Crappa was not happy with the Emperor's decision to surrender. If anything, the Emperor's decision was an insult to not only the Empire, but to the men who had already died as a result of the war while defending their nation. Surrendering now would be an insult to them, their deaths would be for nothing if Molt surrendered to the barbarians, and he could not be allowed to destroy the Empire like this. Eventually, Crappa arrived at the Blackstone Castle, home to the House of Legissa, one of the minor houses in the Imperial Court, but had ambitions of becoming one the more prominent. They were also one of the first noble families to pledge their loyalty to Zorzel when he was selected by those who wanted to continue this war, after he would succeed Emperor Molt after later's death, a possible play for power to win favor with the future emperor. Now Legissa were fully committed to assisting Zorzel with whatever he had planned. Upon entering the main chamber, the legate was amazed by the amount of persons who had answered the prince's call. A number of whom, Crappa recognized as Senator Carlisle L. Tanver of House Tanver, Count Leoto San Soma, whose family operated some of the largest metal foundries in the empire, asides from Minotaro Province, that is, Legate Ellis Scharnhorst, Supreme Commander of the 11th Dragon Corps, Basilisk, one of the largest dragon units in the Imperial Army, and many other nobles, military leaders and even high-standing merchants, all were here at the request of Prince Zorzel. Some of whom Krapa knew, were not exactly seen in high regard within the imperial court as a whole. If anything, many of these men were cut from the same cloth as Zorzel. For the next 10 minutes, the assembled group milled about and interacted with one another, either discussing recent events or just engaged in small talk among themselves to pass the time. Until suddenly, a rather flamboyant trumpet echoed throughout the chamber and everyone looked. They saw that Prince Zorzel had entered. He was dressed in ornate armor and a robe, held a gold and silver sword that was decorated with rubies and other precious gems, while a centurion helmet of similar ornate design rested upon his head. It was quite the interesting sight. "Sons of Sidera," said Zorzel in loud voice, "our glorious civilization is the greatest the world has ever known. Through the sheer will and might of our forefathers, our people conquered the continent and tamed it. We brought civilization to the unwashed barbarians and defeated all who stood in our destiny to control this world and conquer all who stand in our way. Yet I am ashamed to say, that our biggest threat has not come from beyond the gate, but from my own father. As I speak to you now, he is about to sign the peace treaty with those barbarians. He is going to betray our people, and if we don't do something, Sidera will be lost forever. So that is why you had us come here?" Legate Scharnhorst asked the young royal. Zorzel just nodded in confirmation before he replied. "Every single one of us represent the very best of the empire, and as sons of Sidera, we have a duty to ensure that our civilization survives, even in its darkest hour." There were some murmurs among the assembled nobles and military leaders, as Zorzel's words began to sink in. What the crown prince was suggesting, would be seen as treason of the highest order. But then again, their so-called emperor was about to surrender the empire to a power that would more than likely destroy everything their forefathers had built. If anything, Zorzel was probably the only one who had the ability to snatch victory for the empire from the jaws of defeat. All he asked was for their support, and the sons of Sidera were more than willing to give it. It was at this point that Krapa stepped forward from the group on newly formed faction and asked, "So what is the plan, Your Highness? Tell us what we need to do, and we'll gladly follow your orders. We are yours to command, Your Majesty." The others also repeated the words of pledging their allegiance to Zorzel, making him smile wickedly. At long last, his time of glory has come. The Jade Palace was a buzz of activity, as ambassadors and Vice Minister Shirayuri waited patiently for their guest to arrive. This morning, the diplomats had received a message from Emperor Mold himself requesting to meet so as to discuss terms of surrender. To say ambassadors, vice ministers and their superiors were both surprised and elated by the news would be correct, but this was only a small victory in a much bigger picture. It may have been one thing getting the imperial leadership to surrender, but is still unknown if they would accept the terms laid out to them. Outside the palace, Princess Pina stepped onto the balcony with more than a touch of satisfaction. In the courtyard below, Bozes was conducting an equipment inspection of the Yellow Rose. Pina was proud of her knights, and even if the thought of taking them into battle against Japan and its allies was too horrible to contemplate, and thank the gods that real peace talks were finally underway. She saw that they were needed now more than ever. Between acts of natural calamity and the increase in brigandry, and with the imperial army rebuilding after its devastating losses, coupled with the fact that imperial regulars had garnered a very poor reputation with local populations in many places across the empire, the Rose Order would need to keep sharp even as she sought to expand its ranks. Negotiating the release of captured Satyran warhorses from the allied nations had allowed her to recruit more enthusiastic noblewomen from less wealthy families, but swords and armor still had to be purchased out of pocket. Whatever it took, Pina would see to it that her knights were as well equipped and trained as possible. But in the meantime, with finally the peace talks are now officially at hand, Pina could indulge a little in other pursuits even as she hosted the allied diplomats at the Jade Palace. The latest manga translations had arrived from Alnus yesterday, and once the other items had been removed for study, Pina now had time to indulge in what she considered a wonderful interpretation of classic erotic style art. It wasn't the only sort of cultural exchange that Pina noted that was going on. "Champagne. Yes, Your Highness. Tell me," she commanded. "What do you think of the off-worlders as compared to the men of the Empire? I have to admit that many of them have a refined beauty that many of our men lack. But Pina pressed. A sword can be very pretty but useless in battle, my princess. The trick is in seeing if the pretty blade actually has true strength and a useful edge. And is that not where the fun of testing a new blade comes from? Pina asked, raising an eyebrow. It is, Champagne agreed with a blush. Good. Please find Hamilton for me. I need to discuss with her some problems that have arisen in readying the new roses. After that, you may consider yourself free until evening meal. Yes, your highness, Champagne saluted her liege. She had a fair idea here Hamilton was. Of course, she realized, so did her highness. This time Champagne was more successful in suppressing the resultant blush as she headed off. Pina's eyes twinkled just a bit as Champagne left. You seem remarkably comfortable with your nights socializing with our men. Ambassador Russell's voice caught Pina by surprise. The veteran diplomat seemed to have a knack for catching people off guard, she noted with wry amusement. Many of them are curious. Is it not natural? And we need to know more about you. Our future will be in our ability to learn and adapt, and if some of my knights find companionship in odd places, there is a bit of a shortage of eligible imperial men. She managed to keep most of the bite out of her voice. After all, if the empire had wounds, they were self-inflicted and Pina well knew it. By finding your strength and embracing it for our own, maybe the empire can survive. Many of our people would worry that you are attempting to subvert the loyalties of our people. But I take it that you have no such concerns about your own. And why should I? Each Knight of the Rose Order has sworn personal loyalty to me and dedicated themselves to a calling of personal honor. She smiled. Even if that seems a bit naive, just what would any of my knights have to offer you in exchange for betrayal? The designs of our latest armor types. The location of our training centers. The name of Senator Padawan's newest mistress. We have nothing to offer but our own strength, skill, and honor. She then eyed Russell wryly. As for your people, of course, we're all eager to figure out how your battle staves. Your rifles work. But even if we understood it, could we make enough and equip an army and learn how to use them, or would we merely push you into using your might to crush us underfoot? Under those circumstances, all anyone who would betray their oaths to your people could do would be to put us in danger from both you and ourselves. And I terribly dislike betrayers. No, the people we need are those who can bridge our two worlds and hold their honor intact. Fair enough, Russell agreed. You said you were having some problems with your new roses. Pina paused. While the Empire and the allied nations were staring at each other as adversaries across the negotiating table, the Rose Order had directly entered into alignment with the Allied forces in protecting Italica and its environs. It was certainly a bizarre situation, but that agreement had proved to be the key in bringing about meaningful talks. As the situation only pertained to the Order and was not reflective of conditions in the Imperial Army as a whole, Pina felt she could discuss her concerns on this matter. My knights require very specialized and crafted equipment. As one might expect, larger weaponsmiths are somewhat busy of late, but those orders don't affect us because we rely on custom-crafted pieces made by master craftsmen. Recently, someone has been hiring up the best weaponsmiths and quality armorers in Sidera. While we have equipment suitable for training, we will need to find someone else to craft their personal weapons and armors. She frowned. That part is mere inconvenience. The thought that someone else has both the money and inclination to equip their own private army is worrisome. I see. The ambassador made a note to pass that particular bit of information on to interested parties. Hopefully, this new army won't pose any threats to the peace process. I sincerely hope that no one in Sidera is that stupid, regardless of any ambitions they might have, Pina replied. In the meantime, Champagne found Hamilton with Captain Morgan observing some of his Marines conducting hand-to-hand combat training. Excuse me, Lady Hamilton. Champagne approached respectfully. Her Highness wishes to see you. Hamilton nodded. Of course, I will go at once. She turned to Captain Morgan apologetically. Duty calls, Captain. She then looked at the young Champagne slyly, noting how the girl was studying the Marines as they practiced. Champagne, stay here and observe for me if you would. Ah, yes, Lady Hamilton. Morgan suppressed a chuckle at this. I'm afraid I need to take care of some paperwork. Gunny, take charge, introduce Lady Champagne to your men, and assist her with her observations. Aye, Captain, Daniels acknowledged and saluted as Morgan returned the salute and headed for his office. He remembered when he had received new members of his unit a few days ago and noted the amusement in Ambassador Russell's expression as the men of Second Squad introduced themselves. Daniels turned to Champagne. "Well, ma'am, I'm Gunnery Sergeant Daniels. These men are Sergeant Bush, Corporals Bartles and James, and Lance Corporal Walker." "Johnny Walker, ma'am," the young Marine informed her eagerly as she blushed slightly. Back at the Jade Palace, Sugawara had taken a look at the documents and had to admit, the terms were quite severe. More than likely these terms were influenced by the other members of the ANF, but from what had been learned about the Sadaran Empire and how they treated those taken as slaves, even Sugawara had to admit they were more than justified. "Are you sure that my father will accept your people's terms for surrender?" Princess Pina asked the Japanese diplomat, both worry and concern dripping from her words as she spoke. "I will be honest with you, Princess. But your father will have no choice but to accept them." Sugawara replied with a heavy sigh. "Many years ago, my nation was locked in a war it had no hopes of winning. The nations we were at war with gave us more than enough opportunities to surrender, but our own pride prevented us from accepting their terms." "Hiroshima and Nagasaki," Pina replied somberly, much to the surprise of the Japanese man. "So you are familiar with our history. I learned as much as I could when I visited your world," Pina explained. "Japan did not want to surrender, and as a result a new, terrible weapon was unleashed upon your people for your hubris. I am very certain it would not come to that." Sugawara reassured her, though Pina was rather shaken up by the idea of nuclear weapons being used on her people. While this was going on, Emperor Molt sat quietly in his personal carriage, as a team of horses pulled the Imperial Leadership Tower result his destination. His carriage was just one in a convoy of 5 which were protected by members of the Emperor's personal bodyguards. Each carriage transporting a member of the imperial government and military, all of whom shared Molt's belief that the war was truly lost and the only way to prevent more bloodshed, was to accept the terms of surrender placed forward by the other worlders. Eventually, the Jade Palace came into view and an overwhelming sense of defeat finally came over the old emperor. The palace he had given his daughter to train her, knights, was now going to be the location of the empire's greatest humiliation. Where one would expect to see imperial banners decorated on the building, the flags of the coalition now occupied. The Rose Order was there to greet the imperial procession, but they were now joined by other worlder soldiers who were armed with their powerful black staffs. This was the sight that greeted Molt and his companions, as they entered the compound and came to a stop in front of the palace entrance. From there, Molt and his ground were formally greeted by Ambassadors Sugawara, Russell, Zakharov, Vice Minister Shirayuri and Princess Pina, before being led into the building to begin the official peace talks. It wasn't long before the official declaration of Sadaran surrender was been written. The Jade Palace Declaration, August 20, 1997. We, by command Emperor Molt Saul Augustus of the Sadaran Empire, the Imperial Senate of Sadara and the affiliated noble houses, hereby accept the provisions set forth in the declaration issued by the heads of the Allied Nations governments and the United Nations in New York City, and subsequently adhered to by the Commonwealth of Independent Kingdoms of Falmart and the Principality of Italica. We hereby proclaim the unconditional surrender to the Allied Nations forces the powers of the Sadaran Imperial Military and of all Imperial forces wherever situated. We hereby command all Imperial units, wherever situated in the Sadaran people to cease hostilities forthwith, to preserve and save from damage all military and civil property and to comply with all requirements which may be imposed by the Supreme Commander for the Allied Nations forces at his direction. We hereby command the Imperial Headquarters to issue at once orders to the commanders of all Sadaran forces and all forces under Sadaran control wherever situated to surrender unconditionally themselves and all forces under their control. A sinking feeling overcame Molt and his companions, as they sat at the table and read over the article of surrender. Opposite them, Shirayuri, ambassadors and the representatives from each of the Allied Nations members sat and waited for the Imperial delegation to say something. This was it, the unconditional surrender, and the other worlders made it very clear that they would not accept anything less. Although the other worlders wanted the fighting to end, it was very clear to the Emperor that their want for peace was to protect the Sadaran people from more bloodshed. But while the article of surrender was already a hard pill to swallow, the demands being made were as equally shocking. Apart from unconditional surrender, the Empire was supposed to agree to following terms. 1. Recognize the sovereignty of the Commonwealth of the Independent Kingdoms of Falmart. 2. Recognize the sovereignty of the Principality of Italica. 3. Grant independence to all territories that desire to secede from the Sateran Empire. 4. Emancipate all forced labors currently being held by the empire and prove them with compensation. 5. Provide compensation to the families who lost loved ones during the initial imperial attack on Ginza, totaling $100 million US. 6. Provide compensation to those who were taken by the empire for slaves by the empire, totaling $150 million US. 7. Provide compensation to the Japanese government for damages caused by the Imperial Army during the Battle of Ginza, totaling $10 billion US. 8. Provide compensation for cost accumulated by the Allied nations during the duration of the war with the Empire. 9. Disband the imperial military, until such time the Allied nations' governments deem the post-war imperial government competent enough to reform such an institution. It was very clear for the Molt and his colleagues to see that these terms were to punish the empire harshly for their aggression and to ensure Sedera would never be a threat to anyone again. By the time the treaties were signed and implemented, Sedera would no longer be the power it had once been in Falmart, and the worst part of it all, Molt had no choice but to agree to these terms. One by one, Molt and his most trusted advisors, senators, signed on the dotted line. It was finally done. The Sateran Empire had officially surrendered to the ANF, and it was all witnessed by the military camera crews who had been sent to record the event, as well as his daughter and her knights, who were present as well. A humbling experience for the Falmart natives, to say the very least. It is finally done, Shirayuri announced, as the Japanese soldiers retrieved the booklets that had been signed. Hopefully after today, we can start the process of reconciliation between our two worlds and work together for a brighter future, Your Majesty. I too hope that can be accomplished, Molt replied somberly, though it might be hard for some within my court to accept such a defeat. Your Majesty, I don't think I need to remind you that you will have to stand trial by our courts for your central role in the Battle of Ginza. The diplomat informed the old royal. As the head of the empire, you hold personal responsibility for your actions, so therefore, you must answer for them. Molt just nodded, a grim expression now visible on his weathered face. Although he tried to hide it, Molt was clearly a broken man now, realizing that he was to blame for his own downfall. I am aware that I, as well as many others, will have to answer for attacking your world, but, as Emperor of the Sateran Empire, there is one last thing I need to do. Molt then turned to his daughter, who had been silent during the entire meeting, and said, Pina, my child, I have had the pleasure of watching you grow up before my eyes and develop into a proud and intelligent young woman. In the last few days, you have proven to be wise beyond your years and have shown me that you genuinely care about the Sateran people. Therefore, as my final act as Emperor of the Sateran Empire, I hereby appoint you as my legitimate heir and the crowned princess of the Sateran Empire. Pina's eyes went wide in absolute shock and disbelief, as Lady Bose and the other Rose Knights looked at their leader in astonishment. The old emperor reassured his daughter. If the Sateran people are to survive, then changes need to be made or we risk destruction. You are the only one I can trust to make the changes needed to save our people and guide them to a brighter future. But what about Zorzel? Only now I see that he is not the ruler our people needs in these uncertain times. Molt explained. I blame myself for not seeing what he truly was much sooner. His arrogance and pride will only hasten the destruction of our people. I was a fool to think that I can control him once I leave the throne, but it turned out that I've raised a monster. If he's become the emperor, he'll destroy everything we held dear to us and completely devastates of what's left of the empire. No, Pina, right now, our people doesn't need an emperor of war, but a leader who can lead them to peace. A leader that I know you are capable of being. Although Pina could not believe that this was actually happening, that her father had declared that she would succeed him as Empress of the Sateran Empire and not her older brother, she understands that this was the only decision he could make in order to save Sedera. But most of all, her father had faith in her to do what was right and that she was able to lead their people. For herself, Pina never once showed interest in becoming empress, but she also knew that Zorzel would be the worst thing for her people to endure in these uncertain times. She may not have wanted to be empress, but Pina was willing to do what it took to guide her people to a better tomorrow. Without missing a beat, Princess Pina got down on one knee and bowed her head in respect, before the said. Your Majesty, I accept your request and the responsibility you have placed upon myself to defend and guide the Satyran people. Then Molt took off his seal ring and placed on Pina's finger. With this ring, I hereby transferring my powers to you, my daughter, he said, take good care of our empire, but watch out for your brother, he'll do anything in order to take it from you. I couldn't stop him as an emperor, but perhaps you will. You want me to kill my own brother, gasped Pina. No, my child, answered Molt, what I'm saying, is that you perhaps can be the leader our people need to stop his tyranny. I'm sure, that sooner or later he'll make a move against me. He's not alone, there are those many in my former court and senate, who'll gladly join him in order to restart this war. You must stop them, Pina, for our own empire's future. Rest assured, father, bowed Pina, I will stop my brother. The sun had just begun to lower itself in the sky, as Emperor Molt and his caravan made their way back to the imperial palace. By this evening, news about the surrender would reach the Satyran people, and by tomorrow morning, messengers would be sent out to inform the outlying territories and their ruling families that the war was over. The empire had lost. The following days would be filled with uncertainty, as the other worlders would soon be sent to occupy the capital. While the imperial army would be forced to lay down their arms and allow themselves to be taken into custody by the very same enemy they were ready to slave, pens would be emptied and the empire would not have the responsibility of paying reparations to the other worlders. While he himself would now have to face an otherworlder court and answer for his role in ordering his army to march through the gate. But at least the other worlders were allowing him to return to his palace so that he could officially send out the order to surrender. Meanwhile, following the imperial procession from behind, were a trio of USMCM 1161 inches Growler, fast attack vehicles. They were just part of the handful of vehicles which had been flown into the capital via V-22s and were originally intended to be used to secure the Jade Palace, as well as support Operation Shadow within the large city. But right now, all three vehicles were on their way to secure the Imperial Palace, as was agreed to during the surrender. They would later be joined by Japanese SFG and Philippine Scout Rangers who had already been scouting the Imperial residence for weeks. But while the Growlers belonged to the United States Marines, their occupants were in fact, U.S. Army Rangers, all of whom were well armed, on top of the 50 cal Brownings that were already mounted on each of their vehicles. They were just about halfway to their destination in one of the more forest areas of Sedera when suddenly, 3 fireballs shot out from the woods and struck the carriages carrying the Supreme Commander of the Imperial Army, the Lord Hoste of the Imperial Treasury and Senator Gandil London Fremen, leader of the Imperial Senate. 3 of the most important men in the Imperial government were now dead, their bodies burning away in what has been their personal transports for that day. But no sooner had they been killed, arrows began to rain down on the Emperor's bodyguards and their horses, killing many of them within a matter of seconds. In the confusion, another fireball slammed into the carriage belonging to Imperial Minister of Diplomatic Affairs, just as the man was about to jump out. The resulting explosion sending his body into a nearby tree with a sickening wet crunch. This all took place within a space of 1 minute, as the Rangers began to unload their weapons into the tree line in response. By this point, the surviving bodyguards had managed to reach the one remaining carriage that held their emperor. Just as one of the Growlers drove her up to provide cover. But when they opened the door, the Imperials were met with the sight of Emperor Molt bleeding profusely from 3 arrows that were now embedded in his body. Worst still, one of the arrows was in his chest. With the Rangers now providing cover, the Satyrans removed the wounded Emperor from his carriage and placed him in one of the Growlers. The Ranger team leader radioed the Jade Palace about their situation and that they would be returning with Molt. No sooner had the Emperor been secured, the 3 Growlers turned around and hurried back towards the palace with the surviving Imperial guards following behind. Pina, by hearing the news, ran towards the courtyard. Her mind racing with unthinkable thoughts, as she made her way outside just in time to see the Rangers in their Growlers drive into the garden area and come to a stop. Before the princess could say anything or even process just what was going on, the Rangers exited their vehicles with a very bloody and weak-looking Molt in tow. The old monarch was in pain, holding his wounds, as the other worlders' medics quickly placed him on a stretcher and took him inside to be treated for his grisly injuries. "Father," cried Pina, running to him, "what happened?" "Zorzel," muttered Molt, feeling that he was about to pass out. "It was Zorzel. He's the one who attacked me. I should have expected. He learned it from me, the art of betrayal. Now, he betrayed me. What a fool I was." "Pina, stop him." "Zorzel," growled Pina, "Zorzel. I swear, I'll get you for this. By Flair, I will make you pay, brother." "Princess, we need to get inside," said Bozes, looking worried. "Yes, Bozes," said Pina, "tell the knights to go on the full alert. No one may leave the palace without my personal authorization. Send a runner to Marigold Knights and have them requested here at once." "Yes, your highness," answered Bozes. As the noble woman was hurried to execute Pina's orders, Pina herself walked to the Jade Palace, still angry at her brother. "Mark my word, brother," she thought furiously, "you're not gonna get away with this. You want a fight? Well, I'm more than happy to provide you with one. This time it's personal." This is the end of part 18 of this What If. I hope you guys like it. Leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel to see more amazing contents.